Good morning and welcome to the June 16th Oregon Tourism Commission meeting. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes.
There it is.
Great.
Thank you, thank you. Again, good morning and welcome to the June 16th Oregon Tourism Commission meeting. I'm Scott Youngblood. To everyone that has joined us through Travel Oregon's industry YouTube channel, good morning and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. As a reminder, the materials for this meeting have been posted and can be found on the Travel Oregon industry site. That's industry.traveloregon.com. And now I'm going to ask the rest of the commissioners to introduce themselves.
I will go first. My name is Greg Willits, and I have Five Pine Lodge in Sisters, Oregon, one of the most beautiful towns in Oregon.
Good morning, I'm Don Anway with Newman Hotel Group in Ashland, Oregon.
My name is Nigel Francisco. I'm the CEO of Ninkasi Brewing Company in Eugene, Oregon.
Maria Ponzi, owner of Ponzi Vineyards in the Willamette Valley.
Mia Shepard, owner of Little Creek Outfitters and Juniper River Adventures in Maupin, Oregon.
Richard Boyles, Merite Hotel Management, headquartered in Springfield, Oregon.
Lucinda DeNovo, Director of Sales and Marketing at the Mill Casino in Coos Bay, Oregon.
Kenji Sugahara, owner, ACAM Aerials, Film and Television in Salem.
Good morning, I'm Scott Youngblood with the Embassy Suites by Hilton at Washington Square in Tigard. Well, commissioners, the events of recent months and weeks and days have brought adversity and very real pain, and even some clarity to our industry and our communities. COVID-19 has had sudden and severe impacts on tourism in Oregon, and the killing of George Floyd reminds us that racial and social justice have not been attained in America or here in Oregon. I'd like to offer this time for commissioners to share any thoughts or observations on the response, the resilience, even inspiration you've witnessed through these events and experiences. And if I could start, I guess, by asking Commissioner Boyles if you'd like to begin.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Yes, it certainly has been an interesting time and an opportunity for many of our teams to show resilience. You know, as we've had to become a lot more deliberate in communications and in communicating in different ways than we have before, it's we've all had to learn to new ways to see our teams function well, communicate well. It's been really satisfying at Merite to see how those teams have really managed that process through a lot of change. From the outset of COVID, we closed 4 hotels and obviously, furloughed many people. We've been fortunate to be able to start bringing many of them back on, and by the end of June, all of our hotels will be open once again. So, for the most part, with similar teams as we had to begin with. So, one story I'll tell, an anecdote. As we closed hotels, of course, we had to have someone on property to protect the assets. And in one case, it was a general manager who lived on property for a number of weeks. And as a result of her focus on her property during a period when it was closed and there was nobody coming in, I had the opportunity to learn that the grout between our tiles was actually white. So It's an example of someone who really cared for her property and took the opportunity to make it shine for the time when we have guests coming into the properties again.
Richard, thank you for sharing. Commissioners, anyone else?
Scott, I'll go ahead and share something. I guess my thoughts reflecting on George Floyd, one thing that's uplifting to me is the amount of conversations that are ongoing that people are having. I had the opportunity to just teach a leadership and diversity class to the MBA program in Portland. And again, it was uplifting to see how many people are having these very conversations within their own walls of business. They're important conversations. We need to have them. They're not easy to have, but I think those conversations that are hard are the ones, again, that we need to have. So by the death that happened, allowing us to start to have those conversations has been a bright spot, I can say.
Thank you so much, Nigel.
I would echo that as well. I think that this time has been a time of great revealing in the COVID, seeing the resourcefulness, the kindness, the thoughtfulness that has been given to our communities, and how we can pivot quickly as small businesses to where our needs need to be met, can also, I think, be seen in this movement in terms of how businesses are reflecting on how they present themselves and how they are perceived in the greater community, and taking that very seriously. So I think this has been a tremendous time of just, unveiling of real transparency. And I definitely feel it's been a time of taking action and taking positions.
Okay.
Beautifully put.
Chair Youngblood. So
Yes, sir.
I have a couple words. So first off, I wanted to say thank you to Todd and the entire staff at Travel Oregon. You've provided tremendous amount of leadership in these times of difficulty, especially in response to COVID. I know it's been very difficult for many of you in the staff seeing people go, but it's been a necessary action to take given the circumstances in the industry. I want you to take heart that we will recover from this. It might take a while, and everybody in the industry knows that there'll be fits and starts to what comes next. But be confident that travel will return. It might not be in the next month or the next 2 months or even the next 3 months, but slowly and gradually things will come back. And for myself, at least, with George Floyd, it really struck home when I saw George Floyd's daughter, 9 years old, without her dad. And to me, that was a defining moment. And I saw really what this movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, is all about. It's not about Black Lives Matter more than anybody else's. What it is, Black Lives Matter just as much as everybody else's. People shouldn't have to worry about going outside their homes to do the things that they do, all of us take for granted. We shouldn't have to worry about, people should not have to worry about going for a run down their block. People shouldn't have to face people crossing the street just because they're walking down the street. There's so many problems in the US, but right now, what's happening, it's a watershed moment, and people are taking that mantle and running with it. I was at the march in Salem, and I saw so many people from so many diverse backgrounds marching for George Floyd, for the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was absolutely stunning to see such a diverse cross-section of our society taking a stand and saying, no more racism. We cannot tolerate this. And it's fantastic to see in our industry too, people taking a stand and saying, no more. Because it's going to take all of us to overcome a lot of the systemic racism that exists. So I wanted to reach out to everybody and say, do your part, be engaged, be aware of what you say, be aware of how it may impact people, and have those conversations with people to make things better for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kenji.
I just want to quickly just reiterate that, and that was really powerful. Thank you, Kenji. And just, this has been very difficult times, and it's really a time for us to listen and be compassionate and be kind to everyone. And we should always be that way. And, it's a time for us to lead with shared values for justice and equality. And, we need to come together. And I really just want to thank Travel Oregon's leadership on everything that they're doing right now. So thank you.
Kenji, and I would like to thank you for your words. They were indeed very powerful. I think there is a glimmer of hope. I'm so grateful yesterday to the Supreme Court's ruling protecting the rights of the LGBTQ community. And I'm really proud of the work that Travel Oregon is doing in this space. And as many of the commissioners said, now is the time to be having those conversations in your workplace. You are leaders, and we need to do this work because everyone should be treated equally in this society.
Thanks, Lucinda.
Kenji, thank you so much for your words. I think they're spot on and articulate. And I feel like I will lend my ear to this process, not my voice at this time. I am confident, like others have said, that we are in a state that will recover from COVID-19 crisis, recover from current challenges in the economy and with social disturbances and problems faster, stronger, and more organically than other states. And I am really grateful for the forward thinking of our predecessors for setting up reserve funds, opportunity and operating reserve funds for recovery. It is, as I've alluded to, my town is concerned about tourists coming from out of state, out of country to our small town with a large retirement community. We are intentionally suspending the advertising efforts outside of this country, outside of this state, really concentrating on simple get anywhere but home travel going. But it's the wrong time to move people about the country. Travel Oregon has done a great job suspending some of those as well. But at the exact time we do want to recover and we do want to advertise outside of this state, outside of this country, the funding will be challenging. We are all challenged in this hospitality industry, and the TRT dollars will also be challenged as we try and recover. Therefore, I'm exceptionally thankful for these reserve funds and excited to implement them when the time is right. And I applaud the efforts of those that came before us. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Greg. Commissioners, I recall that while together in Independence, we spoke of the privilege of working in an industry that is thriving, but extremely fragile. And of course, we would soon come to fully realize the extent of that fragility. And while we also discussed the unwavering values that we live by, I think those are worth repeating. Values that Travel Oregon strives to uphold every day, building strength and resiliency in our communities for a sustainable future, leading through innovation, the preservation of Oregon's natural beauty. And today, we're going to further discuss the evolution of something we spoke of in that meeting 4 months ago, and the fact that our team at Travel Oregon takes ownership for our body of work and responsibilities in a way that reflects our character and values as Oregonians. I would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to congratulate Commissioner Ponzi on the publication of her book, Pinot Girl, A Family, a Region, and Industry, that was released just last month. And additionally, nearly 4 years since a submission by Ponzi Vineyards and Dion Vineyards in 2016, the TTB has announced the approval of the Laurelwood District AVA, the latest American viticultural area within Oregon's Willamette Valley. And beyond geographical boundaries, this designation defines its area by the distinct soil type, Laurelwood. Maria, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I wanted to at least offer you an opportunity to speak on these topics.
Thank you always for your generosity. Yes, we're thrilled amongst, again, as I said earlier, amongst all this really very deep news. We have had some good successes, and the Laurelwood District is one of those. It's something Louisa and my sister and I have been working on actually for about 16 years. It just took 4 years to get it through the TTB. So it has been a long time coming, and we're especially proud because it does designate not just on boundaries specifically, but on actual soil type. And I think that this is important to the Willamette Valley, but it's also an important moment to remember how special this state is, and it gets right down to the dirt. The fact that this soil called Laurelwood is basalt based with wind-blown freshwater soil is a testament to how long this state has been here, and that we've endured volcanoes and floods, and as a result, we are now benefiting from it. And that is something that we feel that we can show in the quality of our wines from this area. So it is we feel a very special moment for not just the wine industry, but of course for Oregon to designate soil type, a very rare soil type that is not found anywhere else in the country, is, you know, literally minutes from a city center. So always remember that. My book is a very light, fun read. It's perfect for when you're being quarantined. I've realized many people have told me that, because it's just a story of a hardworking young family with big dreams, and the ability to collaborate and work together with other people who are great visionaries. So it's a very fun, easy story, and it's a tribute really, again, to the pioneers and the folks who made this industry what it is today. So thank you for recognizing it. Scott, I appreciate that.
Of course, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
As enjoyable as it is to be together, it's no surrogate for being, you know, together. And since we couldn't physically convene in Lakeview this week, we still wanted to afford our local partners the opportunity to welcome us and to give us an update on what's happening in the region. So at this time, we'd like to invite Brad Niva and Bob Hackett from Travel Southern Oregon to provide a local welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Bob.
I'm Bob Hackett with Travel Southern Oregon, and we are so pleased to welcome you virtually to Southern Oregon. And Commissioner Ponzi, great to hear about the literary achievement. For those of you who want to know more about Lake County and Southeast Oregon and all of that, my plug is for William Kittredge's Owning It All series of essays from Maydell and Plush, and well worth the read to understand this part of Oregon, which we were very excited. And on behalf of the people of Jessica Bogardus at the Lake County Chamber of Commerce, the town of Lakeview, and it's very important to say town of Lakeview because it's not a city, it's a town, and Lake County as a whole. We welcome you to this virtual moment. We hope that we can be in the queue for a commission meeting down the road when things get a little better. Speaking for both Brad and I, it is truly one of the pleasures of our job as an RDMO to be able to work with partners in Lake County and in Lakeview. One of the things I absolutely love about going over to Lakeview is when Jessica sets up meetings for us and we drive over, we never know who's going to be at the meeting. And these are tourism meetings. This is what we do. But we never know if we're going to be the owner of the hardware store, if it's the manager of the Les Schwab store, if it's the ER doc who's the head of the Roundup committee. Is it going to be the program manager of Playa Artist Residency Program? Is it going to be a county commissioner? Is it going to be the wildlife refuge manager from the Heart Mountain area? And it's any and all at any moment. And so this community, I hope that you all get to go to this community and see what true engagement across the spectrum of people in a region looks like. And I will just highlight 4 of the things that came out of the staff engagement with Travel Oregon on the Oregon Tourism Studio that happened about 3 years ago, winter 2018. And again, this is just the nature of working out in Lake County. We hope you get there. The Oregon Dark Sky Network has been a very collaborative formation between Travel Southern Oregon and the partners over in Lake County to truly celebrate an asset that is pristine. It's unique in America. For those of you who've gone to Utah, Colorado Plateau, Michigan for that matter, the most recent dark sky sanctuary is Mount Katahdin at the end of the Appalachian Trail in the North Woods of Maine. This is a rich area for tourism development and community engagement, and all the pieces are in place for Lake County. And we call this the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network because we're in communication with Elena from EOVA, and the sky doesn't stop at the Lake County border. It keeps going to Steens Mountain and over to the Malheur and the Owyhee Breaks. And so this is a long-term project for Oregon and a truly distinctive tourism asset for this part of the state that we've begun to engage with. And again, when Jessica and I go out to do these conversations at the Heart Mountain store in Plush, I trot out my little projector and the screen, and we get everybody spaghetti, and the kids come up from the 8L school, 2nd, 3rd graders, and then there's about 9 of them, and then the other 6 come from the Plush school, and they come and sit down, and then there's ranchers and it's county commissioners and the Heart Mountain Refuge people. And then we all sit down and have lunch, and we then go through Dark Skies and what it's all about. And so these things that they take for granted, and not in a bad way, but that's just the world they live in, is this pristine, magical, natural world. And so they're excited to share that. Additionally, the Western Heritage Committee that came out of that tourism studio, the Geological Features Committee, and the Trails Committee continue to do fabulous work with Travel Oregon staff, and really trying to develop what is a fabulous tourism product in this part of the state, this unknown part of the state. So on behalf of Jessica and the Lake County Chamber, next time we invite you to come to Lake County, kick off your boots and stay a while. And we look forward to welcoming you with some true Western hospitality out in Lake County. Over to you, Brad.
Hi, thank you, Bob. Hopefully, I'm seeing I have maybe some bad internet, but let's hope this works. Thanks for your comments. And one of the things I did want to share, and we wish you were like you, is for many years, we've always had some communities in the state that have always been put on a pedestal of doing things right. And that comes to mind for me is always the town of Oak Ridge and the change to Mecca. And I think the next one that we should recognize is the community of Lakeview and Lake County. They're doing some phenomenal work there, and it's systemic throughout everywhere. And just as Bob said, the diversity of people who are showing up for the meeting is really
We're going to give it just another moment and see if we get Brad back. Go ahead, Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll just pick up where Brad was going to go, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Scott, Commissioner Youngblood. I think where we were going was just to articulate for the commissioners and the rest of the audience listening to this, the value of the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program and the work that Harry and Kate are doing at Travel Oregon and across the departments, the investments that we collectively have brought to Lake County. And as Brad was saying, there's, we all know communities that are sort of out of the circle for whatever reason for a long time. And then when we finally approach and come together with, in a spirit of inquiry, partnership, and cooperation, it is truly amazing the results that we can have across the state. I really do think what's happening in Lake County is, again, one of the models like Oak Ridge, like some of the North Coast agritourism development, where the investment of this industry in communities in Oregon pull those communities together and pull the rest of us together and make us all better and stronger as Oregonians. And so we just want to actually, on behalf of the people of Lake County, thank Travel Oregon and the regional program for seeing them, for coming and spending the time that we all have spent over there to actually make a difference. And it goes across public land agencies, businesses, lodging properties, and the whole community itself. So we just wanted to share the positive RCTP story. And I know we're all facing such cuts, and we will continue to do what we can to show up and remain part of this community, because we've started too many things to let them go.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you, Brad, both for your comments. Brad, sorry about the technical difficulties. Commissioners, I'd like to acknowledge that in preparing this live stream meeting, we met the public meeting notice requirements required by state law, including establishing a new process for receiving public comment and testimony. On Friday, May 29th, the commission meeting notice was posted to the commission meeting page and sent out in the industry e-news, including the agenda acknowledging a possible budget modification, a public comment form and instructions, along with a link to this live stream. We're excited about this new step, a public comment form that allows anyone, whether they are watching or not, to provide the commission with their comments. And although these processes were established, no public comments were submitted in preparation for this meeting. So I'd like to discuss the packet review. I want to confirm that each of you on the commission has received and has had a chance to review your commission packet, including the financials. Maybe a wave of your hand or a woot woot noise. Oh, look at all that. Terrific. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Francisco for reviewing the financials with myself and Todd and Jeff and Kathleen prior to this meeting. Nigel, would you be up to providing the commission with a financial update?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Scott. As you said, we did review the financial meeting, although we understand there's hard times due to COVID. We discussed the new revenue models, what those revenue models look like. On May 26th, we went over the current financials year to date and reviewed those, and then reviewed the revised budget proposal and modification that was provided to the commission on June 10th. So I can report that everything was in order. However, it is obviously an unknown time and a very challenging time with regard to the budget, because we don't know what the outcome of COVID is going to look like at the end of this. I will say, through all of my experience with Todd and the team, they are very conservative generally in forecasting, which gives me, allows me to sleep at night when we come with a conservative eye towards forecasting and we're not overly aggressive. So I really appreciate that work that the team has put into that. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Nigel. I guess at this time, I would like to turn the screen over to Todd for remarks relating to the state of our industry.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that, and I just want to go on record in thanking all the members of the commission for their incredibly thoughtful comments at the beginning of this meeting. These are phenomenally difficult times. You know, the public health crisis alone aside, the senseless death of George Floyd serves as a somber reminder of just how deeply rooted racism and institutional bias is across our country. The inexplicable deaths and violence against Black Americans has to stop. As you may have noted last week, Travel Oregon released a message to our industry to commit to changes that have to occur here at Travel Oregon if for us to uphold the values of human rights, equity and equality, as well as social justice. I have a colleague in the travel and tourism industry here in Oregon, a gentleman by the name of Chad Brown, who runs a company in Portland called Soul River, and a nonprofit referred to as Soul River Runs Deep, Soul River Incorporated. Chad's a Navy veteran. He served in Iraq, and he came home from that conflict and suffered from PTSD. And I'm sharing, by the way, his story as he shares on his website. So there's nothing here that I'm sharing that would be confidential, although it's highly sensitive because it is so personal. He came home suffering from PTSD to the point that he will acknowledge that he contemplated suicide. And then someone introduced him to fly fishing. And as he puts it, through the healing power of nature, he was able to calm that PTSD and find some solace and peace in his life again. And with that, he's been challenged to now use nature as a means of bringing together other veterans that are suffering from PTSD with inner city youth that may never have had an opportunity to really experience this uncrowded, unspoiled natural beauty, not only here in Oregon, but he's taking youth to the Arctic Circle on what he refers to as deployments, so that they have an opportunity to not only experience nature in its most pristine and rugged form, but also kind of come in touch with something deep inside themselves personally as well. So that's a little bit of Chad's story. Chad's also Black. And Chad acknowledged in an email that he sent out last week that as someone who finds such solace and peace in the outdoors, he was now questioning whether he needs to wear his flak jacket again when he goes out fly fishing on his own. And to read something like that for a man who is as centered and as good in, you know, as Chad Brown, to read that he has to question whether or not he's safe in the outdoors should give all of us pause. And it certainly did me. And I just want to challenge everyone listening now. Chad's going to be on a webinar tomorrow night. It's being hosted by Oregon Wild. And so the information's available on the Oregon Wild website, but it's about systemic racism in the outdoors and our urban centers. And I would encourage you to tune into that and hear from Chad directly, as well as others in the outdoor industry and within the tourism community, about the impacts of systemic racism. It's one of those things that we as Oregonians, as we in the travel and tourism industry, this is something we need to do in order to help resolve the issues of social justice, racial inequality in America today. One of the things that we're doing at Travel Oregon through the proactive recommendation of a member of our team, Gabi, who serves on our global sales team, we're setting aside this Friday, Juneteenth, the day that it was announced throughout the country that slavery was over. We're using Juneteenth. We're going to use this Friday as a day where we've cleared our calendars, and we're going to use it as an opportunity to listen and to read, to learn, and to reflect, so that we as travel Oregonians can get better in this space, because we have to. You know, Travel Oregon's role in this larger cause is going to require us to look honestly at how we've approached our work in the past, and we have to commit to making changes as we go forward. The work has to start with us actively seeking other voices, actively seeking other perspectives that we may not have engaged in the past. It means we have to listen, and we have to learn, we have to read, we have to be willing to grow. We have to be willing to acknowledge where we may have been complicit in the past. And we have to renew our agency's work around equity and inclusion, and make sure that we're leading conversations amongst our staff and amongst our industry colleagues and in communities across the state to make Oregon that welcoming place that we want it to be for everyone. We're going to acknowledge what we know and don't know and accept responsibility when we make mistakes. And I'm going to look to this commission to advise us and to hold me and our team accountable. And I invite all of you that are listening as our tourism colleagues to do the same. By engaging and having those hard, respectful conversations, we can make a difference. We have to, and I believe we will. We hope you share this commitment with us, and that we can work together across our state to do our part to advance equity, opportunity, and social justice for everyone. We also need to pull together in the state and do the work of addressing the impacts on our economy brought on by COVID-19 and the steps that have been taken to mitigate it. So I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint here to provide you with because what I'd like to do at this time is share with you some of the background in terms of what we're seeing as a result of COVID-19. I want to give a very special thank you to LaDon and Michael, Kathleen on the Travel Oregon team, who have worked diligently in analyzing this research and helping us in developing this revenue forecast that we're bringing forward to you today. And a very special thank you to our colleagues at Tourism Economics. They are trusted advisors to us. The commission may recall that they were the firm that helped us in establishing our revenue forecast and budget recommendation for the current biennium that we are in. You may also recall that back in February of 2019, the big question at that point was, what was the probability that Oregon would go, and America would go into a recession? That was the question. When would we go into a recession, and how deep would that recession be? Well, obviously here now we're talking about the recovery from the recession and possible depression that's been brought on by COVID-19. In fact, Roger Dow, the president and chief executive officer at the U.S. Travel Association, has acknowledged that while America's economy may be in a recession, the impacts on the travel and tourism industry across this country are the equivalent of this industry having stepped into a depression. So as we look at the recovery, we have to acknowledge that it's going to happen in a variety of ways for us. That initial recovery is going to be driven by leisure travel, and those, especially in the drive markets. So that initial phase is where you're going to hear Travel Oregon talking about how do we get Oregonians traveling again. You've heard us speak to the fact that, we as an agency have been through 9/11. We've been through the global economic crisis. We've seen some of these impacts before, and we've seen how recovery has worked before. Each of those very different, because we have to stop and acknowledge the fact that the impacts brought on by COVID-19 are probably somewhere between 8 to 10 times worse than the impacts that we experienced after 9/11. So we think the initial recovery is going to be driven by leisure, especially the drive market. It's what consumers are telling us. They may feel more comfortable to get in their vehicle, their personal vehicle, before they're ready to necessarily get back onto an airplane. That secondary recovery, that next wave of recovery, is going to be that essential business travel. You'll see some small and medium-sized groups, and you'll also see some of that regional international travel. This is consistent with everything that we're hearing, that Canada will probably be the first market to really recover for Oregon. That bodes well for us because of its proximity. It can be a good drive market for us because so many of our Canadian visitors come from British Columbia initially. So there's an opportunity for us there as well as we move into the second phase of the recovery. And that final phase of the recovery is obviously going to be that longer haul international and those larger events. I'm sure as I reviewed these for you, you also hear Governor Brown's and other elected leaders references to the phases of recovery and what's opening when under baseline, phase 1, phase 2. And you see that reflected in here as well, because very similar models have been adopted by governors and others throughout from across the country. Now, the hotel sector recovery is obviously going to be slow. We take a look at both demand and we look at average daily rate and what's happened during past recessions. And the graph on the left speaks to demand. Demand recovers much more quickly. The estimate put together by Tourism Economics is it takes roughly 7 quarters to recover to peak on average. Whereas if you look at average daily rate, it's almost taken an entire year to recover to where they were peak. So you're lagging fully 5 months behind in terms of that return to rate. What this means is, again, the hotel sector recovery is going to be slow. Keep that in mind because Travel Oregon is funded through a statewide transient lodging tax. What it also means for those of you that are listening in that are in other sectors of Oregon's travel and tourism economy is that you may actually see your business pick up more quickly. It could be outfitter guides, it could be restaurants, it could be attractions, because demand will return, visitor spending will begin to increase, but as manifest within hotel and lodging revenue generally, that will lag total visitor spending overall. I wanted to cover 5 of the favorable signs that Tourism Economics shared with us. The first one is this one related to currently unemployed Americans. And fully 90% of unemployed Americans do expect to return to their jobs. The June 5th jobs report was encouraging. There's a sense that we may have already passed peak unemployment. Emphasis on the word may, because again, has been acknowledged in comments that have been shared earlier. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what the impacts are of COVID-19, especially when you hear people talk about could there be a second wave of infections. So fully 90% of Americans do expect at some point to return to their employment. The second positive or favorable sign is that this whole idea that I shared earlier of pent-up demand is real. Travelers are telling us that they do want to travel. However, how they travel is going to match the reality of the virus. One of the things that we've talked about here at Travel Oregon in terms of what we think will help guide the pace of the recovery is going to be what is referred to as the ability of consumers to normalize the impacts of COVID-19. In other words, how comfortable and how confident are they going to become traveling in an environment with COVID-19? So what we're seeing is, in this graph in particular, is how visitors are telling us, consumers are telling us that they're looking at changing how they travel. generally visitors are telling us that they're changing their destinations. They're going to places that they can drive as opposed to fly. They're also less likely to take those international trips, which means that there will be more opportunity for us to look at Americans as domestic travelers over the next several months to a year, as opposed to their what might have been their intention to take an international trip. The third positive and favorable sign is that while that international travel is stalling, as I just alluded to, what that means is there's nearly 20 million US outbound trips, more US outbound trips than there were inbound. That becomes opportunity. If these are folks that were considering taking international trips before and are not, and they're going to be domestic trips, these will be opportunities for Travel Oregon and others within the Oregon tourism economy to be able to leverage and to entice and inspire with coming to Oregon. The fourth favorable sign is the fact that West Coast economies, which are great source markets for us, you see that as we talk about where we're marketing, who it is that's traveling to Oregon, what is that destination of origination when they're coming to Oregon, and more often than not, you're hearing us refer to Western states. And as you can see on this graph, we're seeing West Coast economies are going to grow slightly faster than the US average. So California, Oregon, and Washington are all showing slightly stronger rates of growth in terms of GDP than the US as a whole. And the fifth is that while the recovery, as I mentioned, will be slow, that fifth positive sign is that there are some indications right now that the worst in terms of the impacts brought on by COVID-19 are behind us, and we're starting to see room revenue on the upswing. One of the things Tourism Economics shared with us here, as you can see indicated in this graph, is you see the US line in that dark blue, but they also wanted to give us an indication of some states are not growing and not recovering as quickly, as you see here as exemplified by the state of Illinois. Other states are rebounding much more quickly, as you're seeing here as evidenced through the Alabama line, the orange line. And those are really just added for perspective. So you can get an idea that there are some states that are growing more quickly. Oregon is doing, as you can see, slightly better than the US average in terms of changes in room revenue to date. So our recovery is at least pacing with the US average, and in some instances is slightly ahead. So with that, commissioners, I'd now like to turn this portion of the presentation over to Jeff Hampton as our VP of Operations to walk you through the context for the revenue forecast and budget modification that we're bringing forward to you today. And then both Jeff and I will be available for your questions at the conclusion of his presentation. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. And thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity. I couldn't help but be struck when you mentioned the Alabama line. I thought I would take the over if given the opportunity, but that's a separate issue. Commissioners, we have in front of us a request and recommendation for a budget modification. And in light of the economic impacts that we've realized as an industry, we've already realized a reduction in revenues as we are closing out this fourth quarter of the current first year of our biennium, and we anticipate significant decreases in revenue as we move into the second year. Like Todd, I want to thank Jeff Locker in particular with Tourism Economics. I want to thank the Smith Travel Research as well for their work and continued expertise. And in addition, acknowledge both Kathleen Stewart, Michael Sturdivant, and Ledan for their great work in helping us. This first slide that you see, commissioners, really is providing you a reminder on our budget modification and expectations for financial records, two things that I want to bring to your attention. First, that our budget is adopted on a biennial basis. And while we often will talk about year-over-year growth in developing either a revenue forecast or in reporting out on our financials in progress, we really are working and tracking on a 2-year basis. The second thing, as a reminder to you here, as identified in Chapter 284 of Oregon statute, the Commission may only adopt or modify a budget after a public hearing. And I do want to echo comments that Chair Youngblood made at the outset, that this meeting was noticed in accordance with public meeting law. It did include potential Commission action on the budget, and there is a public hearing included on your agenda. I'll run through just a few slides with you, and by way of background, remind you of how we've gotten where we are in terms of the Commission action that was taken in historic Oregon City in February of 2019, when you considered a revenue forecast that led to the adoption of the current biennial budget. At that point, we were acknowledging and recognizing strong industry performance. We'd seen from 2008 to really 2018, moving into 19, a near doubling of transient lodging tax when looked at over the course of that decade. And that is as adjusted to a constant tax rate. And so of course we had an increase in the statewide lodging tax, but when adjusted, you can see the industry has nearly doubled in terms of this transient lodging tax as one measure. And we've recognized a decade of tremendous performance. Todd mentioned earlier that one of the things that was looming and was heavy on our minds was the likelihood of a recession and the impact that, if realized, would have on our industry here in Oregon and globally, frankly. The work that was provided, the research done and recommendation from our friends at Tourism Economics identified that the second year of the biennium, and that's the year that begins July 1, saw a significant increase in the likelihood of a recession. So at that point, we considered a baseline model for developing our budget recommendation for the current biennium. And that baseline model was influenced to a great extent by the likelihood of a recession. In fact, when we considered at that time a weighted average and the dampening effect that a recession could have, the downside potential was much greater than the potential acceleration model they provided. Shown in another way, as we looked at year-over-year growth in statewide transient lodging tax, given that likelihood of recession, not only did the year-over-year growth modeling recognize there would be a slowdown in year-over-year growth, but we also identified that fiscal year 21 was likely to be near flat. And in fact, the budget the Commission adopted was inclusive of modeling that had us at about a 1.1% year-over-year rate of growth for fiscal year 21. So at the June meeting in Joseph, Oregon, last year, the Commission adopted the current biennial budget. Our current budget for fiscal or biennial 2019-21, pardon me, is $78,540,000. And it is again worth noting, Commissioners, that the statewide transient lodging tax rate is scheduled to reduce from a 1.8% rate to 1.5% on July 1st of this year. So a few final thoughts, just to reiterate, again, comments that Todd made just a few moments ago. There are some positives on the horizon for us. While our recommendation on the budget modification is in some ways drastic and a stark reminder of where the economy is overall and the impact on our industry, demand is high. there is pent-up demand that's significant. Visitor spending will grow as restrictions are loosened. We've seen that already, and I think that bodes well for Oregon, as well as our share being largely leisure-driven and being a drive market. Again, we're well positioned not only to encourage Oregonians to support local communities, but also as that travel restriction begins to further loosen down the road, we'll anticipate seeing important drive markets for Oregon begin to help fuel Oregon's recovery as well. From an international standpoint, two very key markets for us are anticipated to rebound at a faster rate than other markets. That bodes very well for Oregon. And as Todd mentioned, we can certainly continue to focus on the work we need to do to help aid Oregon's recovery, but the worst may be over. And so all of those positives we believe are important to keep in mind, to keep in front of us as we move forward with our work to help Oregon. Again, with the help of tourism economics, we have modeling that anticipates three potential scenarios. I would draw your attention, commissioners, to the FY 2021 column in particular. We did ask tourism economics to do some additional forecasting that looked out over the curve of the earth, as a good friend of mine was often fond of saying. And as we look at fiscal year 2021, we're recommending a model that adopts the baseline model approach, and that is a potential $16 million transient lodging tax revenue for the next fiscal year. To show you what that looks like relative to our current adopted budget, you can see the distinction. We're looking at a recommendation for commission consideration just north of $22 million. When considered along with other sources of revenue, and you can see not only are there anticipated declines in year 2 of this fiscal biennium, 2021, again, beginning July 1, we're also looking at reductions in other sources of revenue. And our proposed budget for your consideration is one that would be based on a $55,500,000 revenue model. If we look at that recommendation based on the governor's expenditure categories as are identified and expected through Oregon statute, you can see how that budget would lay out in the governor's expenditure categories. And commissioners, I do want to note that these expenditure categories, while identified in statute, and we provide them to you for your review, at our June meeting in Joseph, as I referenced earlier, the commission asked that the agency continue to provide a more detailed and granular look at our budgets. And so I want to share that view of it with you as well. It is a budget model that you'll see reflected in our strategic plan and provides a little more detail. So commissioners, again, for your consideration, we're recommending a budget modification today that realizes a $22,130,000 reduction in the budget. I want to note that as a reminder, the commission has over the last few years taken the proactive steps in light of the recession considerations that were being discussed, and also in anticipation of the change in the lodging tax rate. The commission has taken action to increase the operating reserve over the last few years. It's been our practice to retain an operating reserve that represented about 3 months of operating costs, specifically 5% operating reserve. But as I mentioned, the commission over the last few years has increased, establishing effectively a rainy day fund of sorts in anticipation for the change in the lodging tax rate and based on the likelihood of a recession. So the budget modification we're asking the commission to consider is reflected on this slide. You can see that we're also asking the commission to acknowledge and authorize a transfer from the operating reserve, in addition to lodging tax and other sources for this period, transfer from the operating reserve in the amount of $910,000. I'd also note, commissioners, that one of the things in preparing the materials for this presentation that we were asked to do was to consider a further reduction in the CEO's salary. At the March meeting of the commission determined to reduce the CEO's salary by 20%. I was asked to prepare materials for this meeting that anticipated a 25% reduction in CEO salary. And so this budget as presented does account for that further reduction in the CEO salary. And I would finally ask that the commission further acknowledge that revenues that were previously authorized are for expenditure are still authorized for use in the next period. And that's something, commission, you'll remember that we ask you to acknowledge at every meeting, that where the commission has acted to authorize expenditures in the past, if we have an ending balance, that those expenditures continue to be authorized for use in the manner they were authorized previously. With that, commission, I would thank you for your time. Appreciate the opportunity to present this, and look forward to helping support Oregon's recovery. Todd, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And again, my thanks to you and to Kathleen and Lidan and Michael for the work on the research, and also the back of the house financials to help bring us to this point and help us in preparing this budget modification to bring forward to you as members of the Oregon Tourism Commission. As Jeff noted, that it is the commission that has the authority to adopt and modify the budget, and that is what we're bringing forward to you today. As Jeff noted, this meeting's been properly noticed. There's been opportunity and accommodation made for the public comment period. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn that portion of the meeting over to you. And Jeff and I are both here and happy to answer any questions that you may have at the conclusion of that public comment period.
Perfect. Thank you, Todd. Commissioners, I will now open the public hearing for the proposed budget modification. As was previously mentioned, regarding the processes put in place to receive public comment, the same opportunity was available for testimony to be submitted regarding proposed budget modifications. In addition, after reviewing guidance from consultants regarding the 2020-2021 revenue outlook and receiving the June transient lodging tax deposit from the Department of Revenue, the proposed budget modification was posted to the commission meeting page on June 10th, and an additional notice was also sent in the June 12th Industry e-News. The testimony could be submitted through yesterday, June 15th. I need to acknowledge that no testimony regarding the proposed 2019-2021 biennial budget modification was received ahead of these proceedings. But I want to create an opportunity and some space now for you on the commission to ask questions of Todd or Jeff, or just for discussion on this topic if anyone is so inclined. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair Youngblood. I have a quick question for Jeff regarding the $910,000 transfer from the operating reserve account. And Jeff, I guess it's just, I want to understand, that's not the full balance of the operating reserve account. Can you just clarify that it's a portion of the operating reserve?
You bet, Nigel. Thank you for the question. Absolutely. Because of prior commission action to increase the operating reserve, let me start video here, my apologies. That transfer of $910,000 would leave a balance of $2.2 million in the operating reserve. And again, that brings us to approximately 3 months of operating costs after the transfer of the $910,000, represents about 13.8% of revenue.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Nigel. Commissioners, other questions, thoughts, or comments? Is it important to distinguish that the reserve fund that we're talking about is also separate from the immediate opportunity fund, which carries a balance for Travel Oregon? And maybe I should direct that question to either Todd or Jeff.
Sure,
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Todd. Chair Youngblood, the immediate opportunity fund is distinct from the operating reserve. It has a balance remaining for use in helping support Oregon's recovery, and is distinct from the operating reserve.
Thank you, thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Boyles, I see you just sprung back on screen. Lovely.
Oh, yes, no questions, Scott. Just wanted to be here for the vote.
Thank you, sir. I would just add the commentary that Commissioners, we're in a remarkable position from my perspective to be able to have these funds available not only for what Jeff categorized as a understated as a rainy day, but for the opportunities that the agency, the Travel Oregon, has afforded us through decisive action, through a quick response, the budgetary cuts that they're proposing, the staffing reductions, the really difficult and painful staffing reductions that have already been implemented, amounted to one of the swiftest, maybe the swiftest, for all I know, response to COVID-19 that we've seen in any state agency. And I'm grateful for the action that's been taken and for the conservative and responsible approach that that is being taken now. Unless there's, go ahead, Maria.
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. So the budget is set through the end of 2021, just to clarify, is that how the cycle works? It's through the
Commissioner Ponzi, this is Jeff. The biennium will end on June 30 of 2021. So this budget modification will take us through the end of this biennium, through June 30 of next year.
So if we see changes in any way, we can address those prior to the end of that, obviously. So
yes, absolutely. The commission could take action to further modify the budget throughout the year at another public meeting.
Thank you.
All very good questions. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Oh, Lucinda, yes.
Todd actually went over this with Kenji and I, but Todd, can you give us an update in regards to this budget on how it affects Oregon 20, which I think is what, Oregon 22 now, the track meet, in terms of funding in this budget?
Happy to, Lucinda. Thank you for the question. Yes, Oregon 21 is now Oregon 22. The impacts of COVID-19 resulted in the postponing of the Olympics in Tokyo from this year, summer of 2020, to next summer, 2021. And that put it in conflict with the World Athletics Championships, Oregon 21. And so they have worked with the World Athletics Federation and have, as a result, landed on new dates, which would be Oregon 22. So they'll occur that summer, so roughly a year later. Travel Oregon is is still committed to and has the resources to honor the commitment that has been made since 2016, when we first discussed the opportunity to host the World Athletics Championships. And that was the $20 million obligation, $10 million from our competitive large grant program, which the commission has awarded, and $10 million from Travel Oregon's marketing and sales development program from our core programs of work to meet that $20 million obligation. This budget honors that commitment and continues moving forward on us being able to, like I said, abide by that $20 million obligation that we made back in 2016. Thanks for the question, Lucinda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucinda. Commissioners, other questions? Well, unless there is any additional testimony for the record received by Travel Oregon that's not been provided and reviewed by the commission, we will go ahead and close the public hearing and take up the matter of the budget modification. So Todd has kept us apprised of the budget situation from the time COVID-19 began. We're too familiar with the impacts this has had on the travel and tourism industry and to the Travel Oregon budget and staff team. The Travel Oregon team has now received the June Department of Revenue check, which shows a $2.4 million decline in transient lodging tax for the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. Given these numbers and the report we received today from Todd and Jeff, anticipating a continued decline in transient lodging tax through the end of this biennium, today the budget modification we are seeking action on is a reduction in the amount of $22,130,000 for a new total biennial budget of $56,410,000 with authorization for departmental allocations of the revenue as included in budget materials presented and authorizing use of the operating reserve in the amount not to exceed $910,000 as needed to retain essential programs and staff. I would also like to note for the record that any prior period money that was previously approved for use may be used in the fiscal year 21 period as a beginning balance. Does anyone have questions about any of that? And in the absence of those, of any questions, I'll ask you to take yourselves off mute. And then I ask, do I have a motion to adopt the proposed budget modification as discussed, included in meeting materials and reviewed today?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you, commissioners. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
And any discussion? Then all in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposition? Thank you. The motion to adopt the budget modification is passed. Commissioners, every year we complete a review of the performance of the Travel Oregon CEO. The process to inform that review was conducted by Vice Chair Francisco, Commissioner Boyles, and myself, and included seeking input from statewide stakeholders, tourism professionals, other agencies, and of course, direct input from you, the Oregon Tourism Commissioners, to discuss action on the review. We're pleased to report on the enthusiasm and appreciation for Todd's work and performance, which continues to be voiced both by you on the commission and the industry alike. However, as included in the budget modification we just adopted, a further 5% decrease to Todd's annual salary was added to the 20% reduction, which we already discussed in March. These steps are necessary in response to our economic crisis and reflect the character and commitment both of Todd and our agency to Oregon's citizens. No increase or change was made to Todd's phone or auto allowance. Do commissioners have comments or questions concerning the CEO evaluation process?
Scott?
Kenji, yes.
Yes, I do have a question. Todd, I just want to confirm with you that the additional 5% was reduction was at your request.
Kenji, thank you for the question. And yes, in conversations during the review process with Chair Youngblood and Vice Chair Francisco and Commissioner Boyles, we discussed an additional salary reduction, and that I did make that request.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lucinda.
I have a question as a relatively new member of the commission. Will we receive a copy of his review so we can look at what he needs to focus on going forward?
We can absolutely make that available to you, yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions about the CEO evaluation process? Okay, thank you. Then on to the nominating committee report. The purpose of the nominating committee is to put forward the names of a chair and vice chair for 2020 through 2021. Commissioners Ponzi and Sugihara served on the nominating committee, and I'd like to turn the agenda over to them now for their report. Kenji and Maria.
Excellent. So Commissioner Ponzi and I conducted a search for candidates for chair and vice chair. We sent an email to all commissioners. We received 3 responses. Commissioner Francisco self-nominated for vice chair and Commissioner Youngblood for chair. Commissioner Willits nominated another commissioner, but the other commissioner declined. Given there was only 1 nomination for each position, we are forwarding the names of Commissioner Francisco for vice chair and Commissioner Youngblood for chair.
Thank you both. Are there questions or discussion? I'm just going to allow for another moment of awkward silence. Yep, too awkward, can't take it. Was someone going to say something?
Congratulations. That's all I was going to say.
Thanks. All right, well then, let's move beyond that. It's uncomfortable. And let's talk about the Eastern Oregon RFP for the RDMO.
Scott, quick question. Do you actually want to take a vote on, or are we good?
That's a good question. And I am going to look for advice on the procedural necessity. Mr. Davidson, care to advise?
If you'd like to take a vote for the record, you can certainly do so, given that there is that both you and Vice Chair Francisco are eligible to serve an additional year, and that you are the only nominations. You could, in essence, be elected through acclamation, but if you'd like a vote for the record, you could certainly do that.
Then Commissioner Boyles will certainly entertain a motion.
I move that the commission approve the slate as presented by the nominating committee.
Second.
And those in favor?
Aye.
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 And those in opposition? And just citing my apparent conflict, I will abstain from voting, but thank you. So uncomfortable. Okay, at the February 2019 commission meeting, the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association was approved to be designated as the RDMO for Eastern Oregon for a conditional 1-year term, with their biennium plan to be co-developed with Travel Oregon departments. One of these conditions was based on restructuring and finding a new permanent executive director, which they have done, Elena Carollo. I'd like to now ask Harry Dalgard, as the manager of the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program, to provide an overview of the work happening at the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association. Harry, are you with us?
Yeah, can you guys all hear me?
Hey, you look and sound good.
Good deal. Well, it's good to see you all virtually. Look forward to the day we can all meet in person again. But yeah, thanks for queuing that up, Scott, in regards to the RFP process and the one-year designation for the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association. We've been monitoring progress with EOVA now for the course of the year via quarterly check-ins, in-region consultations, and budget versus actual reports. So my colleague Kate Sapel and I have been compiling those and uploading those online to the dashboard. And we're pleased to report that progress has gone really well with EOVA. They have gone through some extensive organizational changes. Really, I would characterize those as being more representative of the whole Eastern Oregon region. And they've done that through increased stakeholder trainings, or not trainings, increased stakeholder engagements, both in person and now virtually. They've been redeveloping their board structure and bylaws. They've also established a more geographically diverse board of directors. And to top it off, they're just holding more board meetings. From a programming and investment standpoint, a big program for Eastern Oregon Visitor Association has been the initiation of their regional grants program. They anticipate distributing about 100K over the course of 2 years, so for this biennium. And that's been a really instrumental tactic for them to get out in front of the industry and really kind of shift the perspective of what EOVA can provide and offer for the Eastern Oregon region. So that's been a great success. And then also through the work in the marketing space, they've had market increases in social media and overall marketing efforts. So all that said, my recommendation as program manager would be to extend Eastern Oregon Visitor Association's designation through the 23 through 25 biennium. Additionally, I will also mention that Elena Carollo penned a letter that was sent to you all on Friday, kind of highlighting this past year's successes and challenges, and really kind of further walking you through what that 1 year of growth looked like.
That's perfect. Thank you, Harry. Commissioners, do you have questions or discussions? Kenji, sir.
Yes, so I gotta say, EOVA and Alana, great job. I'm really pleased to hear this report because I was really looking forward to see what would happen. It looks like you've taken that bull by the horn. So great job, great to hear. Thanks for the report, Harry. So I'm definitely stoked on making sure that things move forward.
Yeah, and thanks goes to Elena and the EOVA board. They've done a phenomenal job this year and really risen to the challenge.
Thank you both. Commissioners, other questions or comments concerning EOVA?
No, I would echo that. I do have one question for Harry, and that's, Harry, the expectation would be to align the term of this to expire with all of the other terms. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct, Nigel.
Great, thank you.
If there are no additional questions, then at this time, I'd like to request a motion that the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association be designated as the RDMO for the Eastern Oregon region for the remainder of their 6-year term, to bring their term into alignment with other RDMOs, as Nigel noted. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you for the second, Kenji. Any discussion? Then all in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposition? Terrific. The motion to approve the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association to be designated as the RDMO for the Eastern Oregon region is approved. Commissioners, has everyone had the opportunity to review both the February 24th, 25th, and the March 31st virtual meeting minutes? And are there any questions or comments regarding those? If not, I will take a motion for approval of those. Oh, but before I do, Mr. Greg Willits.
I have a quick amendment if possible. On page 4, as reviewed on the February 24th, 5th meeting, I wondered if the mist over Portland might be misconstrued as smog rather than fog. And for large cities outside of this beautiful state, I think our mist or fog could be misconstrued as smog, spelled S-M-O-G, and not fog, F-O-G. And just want to make that clear, because if my message was misconstrued, I apologize. I meant to say, or did say, smog.
Noted, appreciated, and will be reflected. I appreciate the clarification, Commissioner Willits. Anybody else want to clear anything up? No? Thanks, Greg. You could have come off mute to laugh. There it is. All right. Well, in that case, I will take a motion for approval of those meeting minutes.
So move.
Thank you. And is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you both. All in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposition? And with that, the February 24th, 25th Commission briefing and meeting minutes and the March 31st meeting minutes are approved and will be posted to the Commission section of the Travel Oregon Industry website. We are doing all right for time right now, but I think it would be appropriate for us to take a break before we get into the next section. Is anyone opposed to taking a 5-minute break? Does anyone need more than a 5-minute break? All right, well then, by my watch, it is 10:30, and so let us reconvene on screen at 10:35. We will see you then. Commissioners, it is 10:35. We will ask that everybody return to their chairs and re-engage, and we will resume here in just a moment. And we're in no hurry as of yet, but we are going to turn moderation over to Mr. Davidson as we go into the next section for reports, updates, and discussions. Todd, it entirely on your timeline. It looks like we're still awaiting the return of a couple of commissioners.
I'm here, but I can't start my screen right now.
Thanks for letting us know, Mia.
It says unable to start video.
There you are.
There was a large format bottle behind Maria in the picture earlier. I got a Sharpie out and I marked the volume on the level of the wine on the screen. So when she returns, we'll just check.
Hi, you can't see me. I can see you. And you know what? I don't drink quite as much as you all think that I do.
Wait.
I think perhaps that's my problem. Anyway, I don't know. I'd like to get back on. Maybe Sarah will let me on. Yeah, she has to let me in. Yay.
All
Thanks,
right.
Sarah.
There you are. All right, commissioners, let's go ahead and start with the reports and updates and discussions portion of our agenda. We have several timely updates that we want to bring forward, and we're going to start with, we have juggled the agenda that was sent out in advance in terms of the order, because we do want to lead off with a public affairs and policy update. It sets the stage for some of the subsequent updates that you'll then be hearing later, for example, around the RCTP guideline modifications, the grants program update, et cetera. So at this time, I'd like to invite Sarah Morrissey to provide us with that public affairs and policy update. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning. So good morning, Commission. I am Sarah Morrissey, Travel Oregon Public Affairs Manager, and this morning I will be providing you with an overview of the federal and state policies that have been enacted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this next slide shows 4 of the major federal COVID-19 relief and stimulus bills. These are not all the bills that have been enacted, but the major ones. The first 2 in March were focused on emergency response and support for federal agencies, while the second 2 were more targeted toward economic emergency response for individuals and businesses. In Oregon, more than 58,000 small businesses and nonprofits received approximately $6.8 billion in forgivable Paycheck Protection Program loans. I will note that unfortunately 501c6s, such as DMOs, are not able to currently apply for these loans. The next national COVID-19 relief and stimulus bill is not expected to pass before mid to late July. Moving to the next slide, I'll cover 2 policy updates at the federal level. The first is the Great American Outdoors Act. This act would provide $9.5 billion over 5 years to address deferred maintenance needs on federal public lands. It also fully funds the Land and Water Conservation Program. It was debated in the U.S. Senate last week and could be up for a final vote and passage as early as this week, and then potentially move to the House. It remains to be seen if the House would accept the Senate-passed bill as is or would want to make changes. This is a really big deal for Oregon's national parks. We have 6 park units in the state. In 2017, 1.3 million visitors traveled to Oregon's national park sites, which helped support nearly 1,500 Oregon jobs and generated $131 million in economic output for the state's economy. However, Oregon's national parks need more than $105 million in infrastructure repairs. This bill would help prioritize funding to address these deferred maintenance costs, and we are very supportive of this bill. Moving on to the virtual Hill, U.S. Travel has organized a virtual Hill this week in which we speak to how the last few months have been economically devastating to the tourism industry. I will be joined by Travel Portland and Travel Lane County to speak to Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden tomorrow morning. We will be asking for the following items as part of the next federal relief and stimulus package, as well as stating our support for the Great American Outdoors Act. In regards to relief, we are asking to extend eligibility for the Paycheck Protection Program to destination marketing organizations of all statuses. Unfortunately, to this point, DMOs have not been able to access the Paycheck Protection Program. These organizations will be critical in recovering and rebuilding the tourism economy, and they need access to this funding. In regards to protection, we are asking to provide targeted liability protection for businesses that follow proper health and safety guidelines to protect against COVID-19. Business owners are worried about frivolous lawsuits when reopening. And finally, in regards to stimulus, we are asking for an incentivize a safe reopening of the travel economy through tax credits and deductions. These deductions would include the creation of a temporary travel tax credit, allow businesses to fully deduct food and entertainment expenses, provide tax breaks for PPE and sterilization of facilities, and enact a tax measure to help revitalize U.S. trade shows and exhibitions. We are also going to ask for $10 billion in Economic Development Administration grants, specifically for DMOs and small businesses to promote responsible travel practices, encourage visitation, and educate travelers on CDC and state industry guidance. So now I'll move into the state timeline. Katie Claire would cringe at the slide because there's so much text. However, I just wanted to make it aware of all the various executive orders that the state has taken in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the dates in which they were enacted. Regarding our work, the Stay Home, Save Lives order was enacted on March 25th and immediately and steeply impacted the small businesses that make up the tourism economy in Oregon. Since that time, Governor Brown has begun reopening the state through Safe and Strong Oregon Phase 1, which passed on May 14th, and Safe and Strong Oregon Phase 2 on June 5th. In general, reopening is phased geographically by county. Each of Oregon's 36 counties can submit plans demonstrating that they meet 7 public health criteria. The governor's office determines if the plans are approved. If they are not met, as we saw this past Thursday, the state guidelines say that the governor's office can pause or stop reopening and redirect guidance. The governor's reopening rules can be enforced. Businesses violating physical distancing rules can be reported to the Oregon Occupational Health and Safety Administration, which can take enforcement action. Multnomah County is the only county in Oregon that currently remains at baseline. However, under the Safe and Strong Phase 2 executive order, the baseline stage is more flexible than previous executive orders to remain home. There are now guidelines and safety measures for operating retail, takeout restaurant service, childcare, summer camps and summer school, outdoor recreation, and the operation of zoos and outdoor gardens. Regarding travel, it is commensurate to what is open within the county and becomes more flexible as more activities and businesses begin to open. At the baseline level, it is not recommended. If counties meet the reopening criteria, they apply for approval from the governor's office. If approved, they are allowed to enter Phase 1. The counties that are currently in Phase 1 include Hood River, Washington, Clackamas, Marion, Polk, and Lincoln. This is the first reopening stage, and it includes the limited reopening of restaurants and bars, personal services, gyms, and malls. Gatherings of up to 25 people are allowed for recreational, social, cultural, civic, or faith events, with physical distancing requirements. Travel is more flexible, but it is recommended to stay local. Phase 1 will last at least 21 days, at which point, absent a surge in cases and meeting specific prerequisites, counties may apply to the governor's office to enter Phase 2 and further ease restrictions. On June 4th, Governor Brown approved 26 counties for Phase 2 reopening, and a subsequent 3 counties were approved later in the week. This means that 29 of the 36 counties in the state are now in Phase 2. Phase 2 means bars and restaurants will have curfews extended to midnight. Pools and sports courts will be allowed to reopen. Recreational sports can resume in a limited form. Indoor and outdoor venues, including theaters and churches, can reopen. Offices can begin reopening with employees allowed to return to their workplace. And gatherings can have up to 50 people indoors and 100 people outdoors. While residents are asked to continue to minimize travel, there is more flexibility in traveling, especially within and across Phase 2 counties. There's a need to develop information to explain to residents and visitors how to engage in tourism-related activity safety, especially in this Phase 2 timeline. The expectation is that Phase 3, which includes guidelines for large gatherings and events, will not be possible until a reliable treatment or prevention is available. As a result, these are canceled or significantly modified through at least September of this year. Now I'll provide a short overview of how COVID-19 has impacted the state's economy. State economists recognize that this situation is historically unprecedented, with a sudden shutdown of entire sectors of the economy. However, they do agree that the state is looking at a severe contraction and recession in the near term, although the depth and length is dependent on the spread of COVID-19. The slowdown will reduce state revenues. Personal income taxes, which make up 86% of the general fund receipts, will take a hit along with corporate taxes. The state's revenue forecast came out on May 20th and estimated that the state would face a $2.7 billion revenue shortfall within the biennium. The state cannot go into deficit spending and is constitutionally required to balance the budget. The good news is that the state does have around $2.5 billion in a rainy day fund, which did not exist during either of the 2001 or 2008 recessions. The chart in the slide shows the employment percent change from the pre-recession peak. In a typical recession, we lose 5 to 10% of jobs before growing again. This is different. This sudden stop and sharp downward spike is more typically seen in a natural disaster. However, again, this is different. There will be an immediate increase associated with reopening, but as we saw this week with the pause, this will be a slow process. Once there is a vaccine or treatment, the trend is likely to follow a traditional recession trajectory. This estimate shows that the economy could return to pre-COVID-19 health by mid-2024. However, this is all dependent on the development of a vaccine or treatment. A worsening of the health situation could create a double dip or W-shaped recession. This next slide shows a statewide long-term industry forecast and looks at industry mix by region. The North Coast and Central regions that have large tourism economies are hit with the first initial impacts. But long-term, the Northeast region in the state will be heavily impacted due to their dependence on goods production. The Portland region, with a large mix of professional services, will likely lead the way in recovery. Good producers and manufacturers will face the largest headwinds in recovery. The North Coast region will be hit the hardest in the long term as their economy is primarily composed of tourism and goods production. So even though we have the rainy day reserve, due to the state's nearly $3 billion biennial shortfall, Governor Brown did ask state agencies to make plans to reduce their respective budgets by 17% for the upcoming fiscal year. Some partner agencies, like state parks, have had to make larger cuts. Lottery fund revenues have taken a big hit with the shutdown as casinos, bars, and restaurants where video poker games are located were closed. Lottery officials have said revenues could decline 20 to 40% from their forecasted levels. State Parks is one of the partners that is heavily impacted by these lottery declines. The state parks budget is 44% lottery fund and 56% from other funds, including park fees, recreational vehicle registrations, and federal funds. This has resulted in the agency having a $22 million gap in its biennial budget. State Parks has had to lay off 47 positions by the end of June and will not hire over 300 seasonal staff. The majority of the positions that have been laid off are in the professional support positions at headquarters and include positions in which that Travel Oregon works closely with, like the Scenic Bikeways and Waterways position. The agency is funding the Office of Outdoor Recreation Director position through December of this year. Before COVID-19, ODOT made the announcement that due to changing priorities within the agency, the Scenic Byway program will go dormant until there is future federal funding to support the program. So while this is not tied to COVID-19, I did want to make sure the commission was aware of this change in ODOT's programming. So during this time, ODOT will no longer be accepting new byway designations, and there will no longer be a dedicated scenic byway program manager at ODOT. Travel Oregon recognizes the importance of the Scenic Byway program for our tourism partners and will continue distributing Scenic Byway drive guides through June 2021 and continue marketing the byways. ODOT and Travel Oregon continue to work together as this new decision is implemented and will work in partnership to support the byway program as much as possible at a state and local level. And finally, special session. This morning, Governor Brown called the legislature into a special session on June 24th to pass police accountability legislation and adopt some coronavirus executive orders into law. The governor had planned for a special session to rebalance the state budget and other coronavirus policies, with budget subcommittees supposedly meeting tomorrow. However, those meetings, I believe, have been postponed, and the budget work will wait until a second special session, which will most likely occur later this summer. The governor's office continues to discuss removing the sunset on the statewide transient lodging tax. However, we have not yet seen a legislative concept. We will continue to update the commission about whether or not the sunset on the statewide transient lodging tax rate is included in this upcoming special session on June 24th, or if it is a candidate to be developed in a subsequent session later this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Great update. Commissioners, are there any questions for Sarah?
Sarah, the Great American Outdoors Act, you specified that there would be funding for national park lands in Oregon. Is it safe to assume that what we were formerly talking about as the Save Our Parks Act is dead?
I would say that it has morphed into this act. So they have basically moved the legislation that we saw in Save Our Parks into the Great American Outdoors Act.
Okay. Thank you.
Sarah, Lucinda here. I have a question about phase 2. There's been a lot of conversation in our community about indoor events of 50, outdoor events of 100, but there's also talk of 250 in certain venues. Can you give any more clarification to that?
Lucinda, I echo your questions, and we have also reached out to the governor's office. There is language as part of the guidelines that say for venues or social, you can limit the gathering capacity to 250 people or determination of capacity, whichever is less. We have reached out to receive additional clarity around that guideline, and we will make sure to share it with the commission once we receive additional information.
Thank you.
So I got a question for you, Sarah. Great presentation, by the way. The question I have surrounds sort of the sunset provision and whether there is a potential that it might be picked up at the June 24th special session, given that it is so critical for our industry for COVID recovery. And if it does not, or even if it does, would implementation be in time to sort of happen before the actual sunset itself? And if not, if it gets taken up at the second budget sort of special session, does that mean we'd need to go through it again? And I'm imagining it'll be a much easier process since it was sort of a bipartisan effort last time, and it was just a matter of not being a quorum last time. So just questioning that.
Yeah, so I'll try to break that apart. So what we know right now is that there is a lot of interest in the removal of the sunset because we have, and I think we have really shown this on the grants response, and Michelle will cover this in more detail, but the ability to really redirect those funds to support tourism related businesses is something that the governor's office is really interested in supporting. And so we have spoken to them about, potentially committing some of those dollars specifically to recovery efforts around COVID-19 impacts, especially to businesses. So there is a lot of interest. As far as which session the bill will be part of, we heard today about the announcement of the June 24th session, so I don't have more information about whether it would take place on June 24th or if it would be included in the later session. The sunset does go into effect July 1st of this year. So to my understanding, unless it's some type of emergency clause within this upcoming session, if it does happen in July, the sunset would occur. And then there would be kind of a bill that could be made retroactive until back to July 1st. But those discussions we haven't had those discussions with the governor's office yet, because they've still kind of been reviewing and putting together a potential legislative concept. So I don't have a lot of clarity for you, but those are some of the questions that we have been asking the governor's office.
Sure. So as a follow-up, it is potential to be retroactive back to July 1st. So, okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is Richard. Orla has a call scheduled this afternoon at 4 with the governor's office. I'll be participating in the call. And the primary purpose of this call is to urge that this matter be dealt with in this session. No, I think that if this has to be not dealt with as an extension, but as a future bill, the likelihood that that it becomes something less than a sunset with funds not entirely going to Travel Oregon is much increased. So we'll be urging the governor today to include this in the agenda for this upcoming special session. I'm happy to share with Sarah my take on the call today, and she can share it out with you if appropriate.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Richard.
Any other questions for Sarah at this time?
Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, as was alluded to both in Sarah's presentation and in my comments as we segue to this portion of our agenda today, Travel Oregon has taken a number of steps over the past several months to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, the impacts of the pandemic itself, as well as steps that have been taken to mitigate its spread. And truly, the next 4 updates really hone in on that nimbleness, that responsiveness on behalf of the staff team here at Travel Oregon to be able to address the impacts that have been brought on by COVID-19. And the first one will be discussion around our RCTP guideline modifications that have been put in place. And I'd like to ask Teresa O'Neill, who is our VP of Global Strategic Partnerships, along with Harry, who you've already seen earlier today as the manager of our RCTP program, to provide you with an update on those guideline modifications that were put in place. So Teresa, Harry.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Harry will update you today, as Todd mentioned, on the RCTP RDMO guideline modifications, and he's going to present the executive summaries of those plans. I want to thank the commissioners specifically for their input. Many of you gave input on the RCTP guideline modifications, as well as the grant emergency response guidelines. And those were really important in helping us craft both programs' response to COVID-19. I also want to really acknowledge all the regional partners and the extensive work that they did to develop their emergency response plans. They worked very closely with each Travel Oregon department in making sure those plans really address the opportunities available to them on the modifications of the guidelines. Specifically, I want to acknowledge Kate Zappel and Courtney Bredas on the RCTP team in coordinating and facilitating the planning process. It was very extensive. So thank you. And with that, I'll hand this over to Harry.
Thanks, Teresa. So yeah, absolutely. The reconfiguration of RCTP plans was incredibly extensive process, both from a guidelines perspective and then also from redevelopment of plans perspective. Teresa mentioned a little bit of the work that went into collaboration with Travel Oregon teams, but you know, cumulatively, that consisted of 28 different meetings, you know, between all the different regions and all the teams at Travel Oregon. So no small feat there by any means in terms of you know, developing collaboration in this time period. And my hats go off to both Travel Oregon teams and our regional partners for all the amazing work and time that they've been spending on weekly phone calls to update each other, and you know, additional meetings to really define you know, strategies that are going to be most impactful for recovery. So specifically, the commission has seen the adaptations that we've made in regards to COVID, and more broadly speaking, in regards to just overall emergency management scenarios. So COVID presented an opportunity for us to really look at adapting programming guidelines for just general emergency management situations. They didn't exist. We got at it a little bit last go round of guidelines revisions in September 2018 with the provision where we would like to set aside 5% of the resource for emergency management scenarios. As it ended up playing out, you know, 5% of regional budgets was wholly inadequate to address the needs of COVID recovery, and it got us thinking to any other significant emergency management scenario, whether it be wildfire or tsunami or earthquake, knock on wood. But hopefully these guidelines and the revision process will set us up for a little bit of future resiliency. So I just want to go over the guidelines, emergency management guidelines, just real quick, because they set the stage for some of the changes that our regional partners made to their plans. So I'm just going to walk you through these bullets real quick. By and large, RCTP program is functioning unaltered in normal operating conditions. We didn't see the need to go in and tinker with the overall guidelines of the program, but we did see the need to develop a emergency management addendum. And that addendum can be activated throughout the declaration from the governor of an emergency situation, or you know, directly communicated from our regional partners that, you know, situations on the ground really necessitate these emergency management protocols go in place. So we're not throwing the RCTP baby out with the bathwater. But the emergency management guidelines do a few main things. Namely, they increase the staffing administration ratio from 30 to 40%. It also increases the percentage of leveraged programming from 20 to 30%. So some overall macro changes into overall program funding. That leverage programming, you all are familiar with the menu of investment opportunities. That menu of investment opportunities is being specifically developed for the emergency response scenario that's underway right now, which is COVID-19. So our teams have developed specific strategies that they think are going to be most responsive and most impactful to the situation or situational needs on the ground. So it looks a lot, the menu investment opportunities looks a lot different than it has in the past, and opportunities contained within it are a lot more, like I said, disaster response related. You'll remember that during this last biennium, we instituted a regional grant guideline. So 10% was going to the regional grants or regional strategic investment fund. we're giving regions the opportunity and discretion whether or not to run a regional grants program, and a few of them are going to be continuing with their regional grants. Eastern Oregon, namely, has really utilized their grants program as a means for advocacy and really kind of stakeholder engagement. Also, it eliminates the 5% reserve for the Immediate Opportunity Fund. We're looking at all these plans that I'll be sharing a little bit of a highlight with as emergency management plans. So there's no need to set aside an additional 5% of operational budget for a response plan. And then really notably as well, you'll remember that in the 2018 guidelines revision process, we stipulated that resource was not able to be rolled over from biennium to biennium. Under the emergency management guidelines, we're doing away with that provision, and that's in order to ensure organizational resiliency and continuity in programming and investments in moving forward. So we want to ensure that our RDMO partners have the flexibility to excel in future bienniums and have the operational reserves to continue doing some of the amazing work that we've heard about already from Eastern Oregon and what Brad and Bob shared from Travel Southern Oregon earlier. So we just want to set up the system with resiliency, and I think between increasing the staffing administration percentage as well as the opportunity for resource to roll over from biennium to biennium, we'll do that. All right, Finn, next. So just real quick, I want to share with you the operational budget for our regional partners over the course of the biennium. And I'm doing this largely just to highlight the fact that regional budgets haven't necessarily been altered. You'll remember that regional budgets are allocated based on the calendar year and distributed on the fiscal. So our regional partners have a real amazing opportunity to fill in any gaps where other tourism funding might be drying up. Unfortunately, it is a slow punch coming to them. They'll be able to see what happens to the rest of the dynamic in regards to reduction in funding, but via the previous guidelines, we're hoping we can insulate the situation from further damage. So they are afforded a little bit of a crystal ball in terms of planning, and that lag in terms of funding is really beneficial to the overall dynamic. Next. All right, so what I'm planning on doing now is walking you through just a very quick synopsis of each one of our regional partners' big pivots and shifts that they're making in regards to their biennial plans. Commissioners, you were provided with a executive summary and overall budget for our regional partners. And the changes that they're anticipating on making. So I do want to put a big asterisk on what you're about to see in it, that these plans are going to be way more dynamic and changing than they have been in the past. I think that's just a fairly obvious statement and something that needs to be said, though, just because these plans need to be adaptable to how the industry is responding and what the needs on the ground are for each one of our regional partners. So, it makes program tracking a little bit more difficult, but it's absolutely the flexibility that our regional partners need to make prudent and not hasty investments in programming. So just wanted to say that before we go into the overall highlights here. So I'm just going to go in a reverse alphabetical order and just kind of do some of the quick hits. So we're going to start with the Willamette Valley and Willamette Valley Visitors Association. In terms of global marketing, they're looking at investing in some co-ops with the marketing team, Your Story Everywhere, and specifically delivering that to our to their sub-regional DMOs, custom media content, Oregon media activations, and Expedia co-ops. In the destination development space, the Willamette Valley Visitor Association is looking at investing in visitor management and visitor communications campaigns. So really leveraging the Take Care Out There campaign that you guys have heard previously about. Working with our Global Strategic Partnerships and Destination Development team on virtual training and engagement assistance programs. And then just overall help with the tourism sector tourism sector recovery. Also looking at making an additional or a continuing investment, I should say, in capacity building via the RARE program, which sets almost like an internship program for tourism professionals. In the global strategic partnership space, they're looking at investing in membership dues for industry trade groups such as ODA. So being able to have the flexibility to invest in local organizations is definitely something that we're wanting to see out of our regional partners. And in the global sales space, WAVA is looking at investing in Brand USA opportunities. Next, shifting down to Southern Oregon. Southern Oregon, you know, just from a highlight level, they're really looking to increase global marketing. They see the opportunity in Northern California as one that they've already and currently, you know, investing significantly. So the proximity to California has been something really beneficial for their marketing efforts, and really something that they're going to invest further in throughout the remainder of this biennium. They're also looking at doing more product development in the Rogue Valley Food Trail, and then also leveraging investments in the Oregon Trails Fund, which is an awesome program that the Destination Development team has leveraged with the United States Forest Service as a cost share agreement. So an awesome reimbursement opportunity for our regional program there. In the global strategic partnership space, Southern Oregon is definitely working more strategically and comprehensively with their DMO partners. They're hosting weekly calls with DMO partners and really being great stewards to their stakeholders. And then in global sales, I think they're really waiting to witness a rebound before significant investments are made in the global sales space. Shifting to the Portland region, in terms of Portland strategies, they function off a sub-regional structure that allows a lot of their sub-regional partners, such as Clackamas County, Washington County, Columbia County, and Gresham, to really develop a little autonomy and almost run their own little RCTP within the greater Portland region. They have their own individual plans that are coming out of those investments, but these are kind of just the overall highlights or themes seen in their executive summary. By and large, they are looking at preserving a lot of their resource and proactively rolling over that resource into the next biennium. I think, as we all know, Portland region has been really significantly affected via visitation right now, both from a corporate and leisure standpoint. COVID and protests are definitely significantly impacting that. So in terms of how the region and RCTP investments function, I think we are looking at rolling over a lot of that resource into the next biennium as a protective measure. Otherwise, Amanda and her team has been working really extensively in terms of just developing new relationships with new organizations and new economic development entities that haven't necessarily been the focal point of their work before, but are now reaching a point where that is a main focus. Next. Shifting to the coast. The coast, has really made some significant pivots, specifically in looking at the overall character of the coast. I think the coast has been a region that has definitely highlighted the various effects of COVID. I think we're all fairly familiar with spring break and the approach that a lot of people had in terms of going to the coast and kind of having a little bit of backlash in terms of local sentiment. So that's a really dynamic situation, and the North Coast and South Coast have definitely kind of further segmented themselves in terms of the opportunities available and kind of just overall stakeholder sentiment. I think one thing is clear though, there's a significant desire to drive overnight visitation now that everyone has reached either phase 1 or phase 2, or all the counties have reached phase 1 or phase 2 of their recovery and are anticipating hopefully a strong summer. But overall, the coast is really looking at making investments, that are evergreen investments in online resources, infrastructure, content. The coast has had a lot of pre-existing work in terms of developing subcommittees with land managers. They're seeing increased demand on their lands, hiking trails. So working with land managers more than ever has been a focal point for them in this shift. They also want to help just generally boost community morale. Tourism is such an integral part of the coast that, with it taking a big dive this spring, I think a lot of the communities are just in need of a little brightening. And also in terms of investments and pivots, they are looking to make significant investments in diversity and equity and inclusion investments, which is amazing to hear and really applaudable. I think a lot of our regions are also looking at making investments in that space. All right, next. Shifting to Hood Gorge. So the big change in the Hood Gorge region is, similar to the northern Oregon coast. They have been experiencing a lot of, demand or, resource demand on their hiking trails right now. So in terms of phased openings, I think they are going to be experiencing a little bit of a staggered approach there. So whereas in the past they were making a lot of investments in destination development and global strategic partnerships, I think they're really looking to shift more to the marketing space currently to really kind of effectively market the lesser known and lesser traveled to destinations within the Mount Hood Gorge and the Mount Hood Gorge region. And then similar to other regions, I think in the global sales space, they're looking at limiting investments and then relying on Travel Oregon's global sales team to really do additional work. So that's one important consideration as regions are altering their investments. Sometimes it's putting additional reliance upon Travel Oregon's teams to do increased work in the space. So it's a real dynamic situation there. Next, moving on to Eastern Oregon. Talked a little bit about this earlier. I think that the key highlight I'd like to mention in terms of Eastern Oregon is they will be continuing their grant program, and then also continuing a lot of destination development work, specifically in agritourism and cultural heritage areas, looking to further their outdoor recreation investments, and yeah, continuing their strong marketing work. And then lastly, moving on to Central Oregon, they've developed a pretty extensive marketing approach and plan that leverages engagement and messaging, and they're really looking at utilizing public relations and consumer sales to further that message. They're going to be continuing their investments in the Discover Your Forest program, and then kind of doing almost a trailhead ambassador style program with the Deschutes National Forest. So really that frontline communication perspective to ensure social distancing and ensure safety on the trails that are being more heavily frequented. In the global strategic partnership space, they are thinking about pausing the grants program, and they are going to be making investments into STR hotel performance. One thing to note in the the Central Oregon plan is that they are going to be continuing their investments in the air service task force, which helps ensure that air service comes back to the Central Oregon region via Ben Redmond. And then overall in staffing, around 200,000 of their budget will be going to staffing and moving forward in the Central Oregon region. So that's really a high level synopsis, and I apologize to our regional partners for limiting what I said to a few bullet points. But in the sake of brevity, I'm just gonna stop there and let you all know that you have the executives, the further executive summary and budgets. Kate and I will be working with Travel Oregon teams and our regional partners to get the updated plans up on the dashboard, probably first 2 weeks of July. So that should continue to provide that transparent look into how plans are progressing throughout the year. So with that, I really thank you all for the opportunity to butcher our regional partners' plans, but I thank you all for bearing with me on the web report there.
Harry, thanks for the report. I appreciate it. I just want to add my thanks to not only the Travel Oregon team, and I mean the entire team. I know Global Strategic Partnerships, Teresa, your leadership, and Kate and Harry on this work was obviously instrumental, but obviously revising that entire menu of investment opportunities to put out to our regional partners. And then huge thanks to our regional partners. As Harry mentioned earlier, there were over 24 different meetings that were convened between regional partners and members of the Travel Oregon team in looking at ways to revise the guidelines that would be helpful, as well as then ways to now revise the plans within these new guidelines. And finally, I'll just add my thanks to the commission. You moved quickly in reviewing the proposed guidelines, offered very insightful perspectives and feedback, and that we were able to then take and use when adopting the final addendum, the crisis addendum that Harry alluded to. So my thanks to everybody. Commissioners, are there any questions that you have for Harry at this time?
Are these regional partners experiencing similar labor or reductions to staff? Harry?
Well, I think if you look at yes, I mean, some have experienced reductions in staff. If you look at the broader context in some of our regional partner structure, significant layoffs have occurred. So yeah, there has been a decent amount of capacity loss, but with amended emergency management guidelines, we're hoping to stem any future losses.
Great, thank you.
Harry, your self-deprecation is never warranted. Really nice reporting, concise, and thanks for providing the background material that we were all able to review in advance.
Yep. Harry, I want to echo that. That was a huge heavy lift on all of your parts. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done with the regions, and the work definitely shows in the report. I know there's a lot more than what you put, but great job.
Well, thanks goes to the regions.
All right, Harry, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Great work. Commissioners, next up is the grant program update. Teresa is going to also tee this one up, and she will be joined by Michelle Woodard, who manages the competitive grant program and the wine country license plate program, all the grant programs for Travel Oregon. So Teresa, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Todd. And yes, Michelle Woodard will give you the update. I'm actually so honored to be able to do this with you all today. I think it's some of the most important work that we've all ever been involved with at Travel Oregon. I also really specifically want to acknowledge Lisa Edel and Jessica Ochin for their tireless work in executing this program, from the announcement to the review and then awarding over $800,000 in grants. And many Travel Oregon staff supported this as well. Specifically operations and Robert in making a reality for all of these businesses across the state, because he got all these checks sent out last week. So with that, I'll just hand it over to Michelle so she can guide you through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Commissioners, thank you for letting me join you today. A lot of things have transpired since we last were together in Independence in February, and that's probably an understatement. So I hope you're all well and safe, and I'm glad to be here to share the work we've been doing through the grants program. If we were in person, Lisa Edel and I would be tag teaming this presentation and adding additional details from strategy. But to help streamline things with the online setting, you'll just be hearing from me today. So next, Matt. In April, Travel Oregon announced the award of $243,000 for the Oregon Wine Country License Plate Matching Grant Program. Again, as a reminder, this program is funded through the sales of the Wine Country License Plate. You can see the award recipients on the screen and the culinary and wine tourism marketing projects that will come to life over the next 14 months. Applications were submitted for this program prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm pleased to share that we had the highest number of applications submitted since the program's inception in 2015. We find this to be a great sign as we move forward with administering this program. And to help with the ongoing pandemic, upon award, the Grant Review Committee extended the project completion deadline for this grant cycle until August 31st, 2021. Many great things to come. The other grant program that we had ready to launch in April was the 2020-2022 Competitive Medium Grants Program. And from there, things shifted. You can see where we ended up with the COVID-19 Emergency Response Grants Program outline that's on the screen. I'll say this was really an interesting paradigm because in late April, we continued to hear from folks that were just really raring to go and ready to move forward with these projects that would fit really well with the goals of the Medium Grant Program. Yet at the same time, we were seeing this growing need as funding began to decline drastically and stop completely for portions of the travel and tourism sector. Seeing these things, hearing from our partners on both the regional and local levels, and weighing what other funding opportunities were available and in the works, we knew we needed to make a shift in the grants program, and we knew we needed to do it quickly. This wasn't an easy task. We knew there was a lot of need, and we're a statewide organization with $800,000. I think knowing what type of activity to fund was actually the easier task in developing the guidelines. and determining who would be eligible to receive funding posed the most challenge. I'll start with the challenge of who. A few years ago, one of our grant review committee members who's worked across the state for 30 years posed a comment after the review that has really stuck with me ever since. And the comment was this: you know, Travel Oregon can't be everything to everyone. And from a grants perspective, where we have a limited amount of resource, as we moved forward in our competitive grants program, and as Travel Oregon moved forward with its strategic planning, we knew we needed to think more clearly about aligning our efforts and outcomes. Do we want our impact to be broad, or do we want it to be deep? How can we achieve both? You would have seen a shift in some of our funding elements in the Medium Grants program. And I think that thinking helped us find confidence in the Emergency Response Grant program, in knowing that we can't be everything to everyone, and that's okay. As an organization, Travel Oregon knew we had to be specific in who is eligible for these limited dollars. And this core group of small businesses and regional and local destination marketing and management organizations will truly be vital to economic recovery efforts. We also knew we needed specifics around eligibility in our guidelines because we had an extremely tight time frame, and we needed to be able to award dollars to make sure that that funding would make an impact. Reviewing thousands of applications just wouldn't be feasible. Now to the what. What did we want to fund? Well, business continuity expenses, mortgage payments, insurance, electric bills, and importantly, wages. The goal of this program was to maintain jobs. We wanted to keep businesses in Oregon from shuttering. So what did we see? Did we make the right choice? Was there a need for these dollars? Yes. The next few slides offer some quotes pulled directly from applications. I would be lying to you if I said I didn't tear up while reading most of these applications. We had 332 submitted. I honestly didn't know what to pull for this presentation because I could have chosen any of the applications to share. The need was evident across the board. Some of the most heartbreaking applications I read were from those that were not even eligible for this grant program, but applied because they had nowhere else to turn. They didn't know what to do, and they were desperate to save their business. Here you see some of the quotes from our outfitters and guides. I think this single statement fit for many. The stay-at-home order has effectively shut down outfitters and guides. The need was clear. The application was open for 5 days. In that time, we received 332 applications for just under $3.5 million. Our grants work accelerated from there. We had 13 business days to move 332 applications through a grant review process and announce the award of funding. This took a tremendous team effort, including by some of those folks that are no longer with Travel Oregon, in particular, Carol Astley and Jessica Ochin. One of the hardest things to see when managing grants is applications with some component incomplete or missing that disqualifies an applicant that you know needed these funds. It's also difficult, as was the case in this funding cycle, to know that there were not enough funds to cover every request. I had someone respond to me via email after the award announcement to inform me that we could have just taken all of the grant dollars available and divided it amongst everyone that applied. Yes, that would have been one approach and fairly simple, but thoroughly reading and evaluating each application independently, although it takes time, it allows us to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the applicants and are considering the individual impacts that they took the time to present to us. So after this period of evaluation, review, and recommendation, we ended up with 121 businesses awarded $800,225. We had regional representation, 30 of 36 counties represented. As part of the grant guidelines, preference was given to those in communities of 35,000 residents or less. 90% of the awarded funds went into those communities. Remember that goal of saving jobs? More than 70% of the funds are dedicated to cover some portion of payroll expenses. Here you see a regional breakdown of funding. And please note, some of our guides and outfitters operate in multiple regions, so that is reflected in these totals. And really, this is just a great cross-section of funding. And here you can see the awardees broken down by organization type. Again, a great division of funding, with the exception of some really limited dollars and some really extremely strict parameters in our small grants program. This is really the first time that we funded the for-profit sector. And 69% of these funds went to for-profit businesses. We learned a lot in opening funding to this group, and we still have a lot of things to learn as we move forward. And here's what we heard. This isn't the full list, but several quotes that we pulled to let you see the gratitude. These dollars are making a difference, and there is so much appreciation. I also want to specifically recognize Matt from GSP and our operations team. In particular, Kathleen, Robert, and Gracia. We implemented this program with an extremely tight time frame to make sure that these dollars could make a difference, especially for paying bills and wages. We received signed contracts and invoices from 56 awardees in a 4-day span, and we were able to turn around and send them their grant payment, which should arrive in their mailbox just 10 to 12 days after the award announcement. I'd like to know of another state agency that's able to put a program into action and turn around payment this quickly. So please let me know if you know of one. I asked Robert as we worked back and forth on our invoicing and payment processing and W-9s if this was the largest number of checks for a single check write. He told me it would be close, but it was definitely the most new contracts for payment that needed to be created in an extremely narrow window of time. As an organization, we know these funds are valued, and we're working as quickly as possible to get money to these businesses. So what's next with the grants program? Well, we have funding budgeted for the upcoming fiscal year. And really, we're looking at how we can potentially adapt both the Oregon Wine Country License Plate Matching Grant Program and the Competitive Grants Program to be able to assist with recovery efforts. We've pulled a potential fall of 2020 Oregon Wine Country License Plate Matching Grant cycle to help with recovery. And we've been in conversations with both the wine board as well as some of the winery associations to discuss what they see as needs and opportunities. For the competitive grants program, we'll continue to work with our marketing team and the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program to determine when it's best to move forward in recovery efforts and how the grants program can play a role. As I hope you've been able to see with the COVID-19 emergency response grants, we're able to quickly adapt our funding priorities, and we'll work to make these upcoming grant dollars a valuable resource for recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Great update. And thank you so much for including both the quotes from the applications that really demonstrated the need, but also for the pull quotes that you shared for the folks that had received the grants and their gratitude for that. Commissioners, I just want to emphasize again that this is this work that Michelle and the Global Strategic Partnership team and really the team at Travel Oregon because it was a cross-functional group of folks that reviewed the grants. You heard Michelle's comments about the work of the ops team in managing the grant agreements, those contracts, as well as processing those payments. It's, again, evidence of the foresight of the industry back in 2003 in asking that Travel Oregon be established as a semi-independent agency and to provide us this kind of flexibility and responsiveness when it comes to carrying out the programs using the dollars that we are entrusted with through the statewide lodging tax revenue. So Michelle, great report. Thank you for that. Commissioners, are there any questions for Michelle or comments?
I don't even know why I took myself off mute because I'm almost speechless. Michelle, most of us have, both commissioners and participants and just people viewing remotely, have had to make some really difficult decisions over the course of the past few months. And I would stack what you've gone through with your partners, your team, as or more difficult than anything any of the rest of us have gone through. Thank you so much. Just thank you for being able to put this in the field so quickly, for being able to act so decisively, and for being able to spread the resource and to be a little bit sappy, the hope and optimism that you all did in such a quick period of time.
Thank you.
Scott, I second that. You save jobs, you save people's businesses. And it's that sort of thing which is fantastic about our community and Travel Oregon, is to be able to do something like that for the people who we work for. So great job to you and the team.
I would just like to echo that too. I think it's what I was saying earlier about these times are very revealing, and you know, putting your walk into whatever you're talking is exactly what you guys just did. And Travel Oregon is showing itself again as being there for the broader community, including the little guys and the little girls. So just kudos, nice work. Really proud to be a part of that.
It was a major team effort, so thank you. Thanks for the kind words.
Michelle, I'll add my my appreciation too for what you and your team accomplished and how quickly you got it done. You did mention that you learned some things, or the team learned some things, in funding private businesses for the first time. Could you elaborate on that comment a bit?
Yeah, a couple, just some smaller components that we learned. There's a lot of management groups that own hotel properties, and in our application we actually didn't ever ask for the name of the hotel property. So some small nuance there where it's like, oh wait, which property is this? We were able to achieve finding that out, but just a small piece there. Another component just on the lodging end as well was, I think if we were to move down funding the sector again, we would want to have some proof of confirmation of payment of lodging tax. So again, we could see that in some of the financial reports that we received, yet it wasn't included in everything. And I think there's a wide, I would just say there's a lot of difference in financial reporting from a mom and pop type operator and someone else that is, you know, this employer of 25 employees or fewer. And so there was a lot of disparity, I think, in just the financials themselves, which we would probably want to ask for just additional information as we move forward to be able to more clearly compare things. So those are just two components, Richard, but some other things too that we're still kind of brewing on and understanding. It's hard when we went from you know, knowing how the nonprofit sector worked to going to folks that have never received grant funding before, because really it's an anomaly to fund for-profit businesses with a grant. So I think that in itself is something that we're still seeing. Okay, what are the questions we're going to get from folks that just are not, you know, familiar with this type of process?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Michelle? If not, Michelle, thank you, not only for this presentation, but for the great work in administering this grant program. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Todd.
Commissioners, next I'll invite Alexa Carey from our Destination Development team and Lisa Edel with our Global Strategic Partnership team to present to you on a new collaborative Travel Oregon program that we have put in place to help support communities and industry partners as we go from economic crisis to economic recovery. So Alexa, Lisa, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thanks so much, Todd. Good morning, Chair Youngblood and fellow commissioners. My name is Lisa Edel, like Todd said, the Director of Global Strategic Partnerships. And I'm here today in partnership with my colleague, Alexa Carey, Director of Community-Based Services, to share an overview of Travel Oregon's newly developed virtual training, education, and assistance program. Travel Oregon is developing a collaborative agency-wide education program that will be part of the rebuilding phases of the tourism economy. The program will support our statewide partners that have experienced significant loss through this pandemic and help lead us into the future. Travel Oregon will coordinate with key agencies and partner organizations to deliver information on critical crisis topics and technical assistance to support our industry.
One of the highlights of this new program will be the strategic alignment and cross-functional pivoting that's going to maximize the strengths and the best practices and the knowledge of all the departments within Travel Oregon. And this will include building upon like community-based programming and values, the history of visitor experience development, the ability to amplify businesses through world-class marketing campaigns, ability to highlight exceptional visitor experiences internationally, build partnerships, and fund impact-driven projects like Michelle just covered, and more. Within this program, cross-departmental teams will be implementing as well as advising and being responsive to industry needs during a time of rapid change and continuous unknowns.
Two key strategic elements will drive the development of the virtual engagement and education program. Travel Oregon will build engagement and alignment with our key national, state, and community level partners to clarify the industry's needs, source the best available content, and reduce duplication of efforts. Implicit in this work will be to create strong alignment across Travel Oregon departments, and this will also include other partners such as RDMOs, Oregon's 9 Confederated Tribes, U.S. Travel, Business Oregon, Orla, ODA, SBDCs, land managers, Oregon University partners, and many others. This program will package information, highlight tools, and offer engagement opportunities that can be applied at different levels, from a statewide state of the industry presentation to focused discussion forums for specific industry groups to share effective practices. We will also offer programming the regional partners can co-op to support even more targeted and intimate engagements. The program aims to offer a suite of education and engagement tools that will serve the wide range of programming scale and outcomes. Mediums for engagement include online learning, focus area discussions, remote presentations for local viewing, discussions and resource forums. Travel Oregon would also collaborate with key partners like SBDCs, SBA, Business Oregon, Regional Solutions to amplify and direct technical assistance offered, such as one-to-one business coaching. We would also build a virtual business education and assistance program platform that, when applicable, will be tied back to the Travel Oregon industry website. Provide follow-up technical assistance, generally, again, one-on-one business coaching, such as grant writing assistance, loan application assistance, network management, tour operators, guides, and outfitters assistance, culinary and agritourism permitting, and direct source assisting. And again, I would like to say that we would align with those other partners to offer that education. We would provide and convene a role for key industry groups to discuss important cross-cutting efforts to sustain visitor-facing industries, such as providing coaching around business model modification, website development, and e-commerce for business resiliency, and set up opportunities for new dispersed overnight product, such as farm stays. Program outcomes. Intended outcomes of this program would include to increase travel and tourism business profitability, job retention in this sector, businesses' ability to provide staff and customers with a sense of security and safety, businesses' understanding of best practices for recovery and resiliency, businesses' confidence with offering safe experiences and operating in this new environment, marketable experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic, local and state tax revenue, and efficiencies between agencies providing support services to targeted sectors. As the state gets closer to peak travel season and reduced restrictions around the shelter-in-place order, it is essential to develop educational tools to support the greater industry and provide timely, relevant information to small businesses. The landscape is changing quickly, so the educational content and development must be nimble and responsive to our industry's needs. I'd now like to walk you through our phases. Phase 1, crisis, stay home and save lives, emergency response. Timeframe, late April through June. A shorter term, immediate action that can be taken to deal with peak crisis period focused on pertinent information, funding, and state and federal resources specifically related to COVID impacts. To initiate phase 1, Travel Oregon hosted a State of the Industry webinar Wednesday, April 29th. Oregon's tourism industry was invited to join. Todd, as you know, our CEO of Travel Oregon, along with Alana Houston, Managing Director of Oregon Destination Association, and Jason Brandt, President and CEO, Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, for an in-depth discussion to inform the industry of Travel Oregon's efforts to address the needs of travelers, partners, stakeholders, and residents in a time when up-to-date information was crucial. Takeaways included a look at overall economic outlook, recovery strategies, and opportunities that guided our partners in preparing for the next phase of this crisis. We had 976 total registrations. All who registered received a link to the recording and a copy of the presented slide deck, and those assets are also posted on the Travel Oregon Industry website.
Also, as part of that phase 1 training, Travel Oregon hosted a Reopening the Oregon's Outdoors webinar to help translate what Oregon's phased approach to loosening the stay-at-home restrictions means for reopening the outdoors to the public. The content included pretty detailed information about what is permitted in phase 1 reopening and the implications for the tourism industry. The panelists included the Oregon Office of Outdoor Recreation, U.S. Forest Service, and BLM. We had over about 250 community partners that received that information to help support reopening right in time ahead of a very busy Memorial Day weekend. Additionally, Travel Oregon has also curated a comprehensive online toolkit for our COVID-19 toolkit and resources that highlights very essential information, opportunities, data, support for businesses that would really help DMOs, businesses, and others in the tourism industry. This information lives on the industry website and then is constantly updated with tools to support the greater tourism community.
Phase 2, recovery and reopening Oregon. Timeframe, June through October. Planning for potential reopening and issues associated with reopening, which include community preparedness, dealing with high use, marketing, and customer service. In phase 2, we will continue to collaborate with other agency partners and really take a deep dive into content and training topics. I'd like to share an example with you. Currently, we are in partnership with the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association and the Oregon Wine Board. And one of our next webinars will be to offer a reopening Oregon's restaurant and wineries to the industry as part of phase 1. In phase 2, we would consider offering a webinar to the same sector, but the content will be directed around maybe customer service, how those businesses now interact with customers while their entire staff is required to wear a mask or stand behind plexiglass. Create discussions on how these businesses can respond to comments on social media due to their new restrictions, and so on. Phase 3, we will offer more business development and technical assistance. And I would now like to turn it over to my colleague Alexa to walk you through that final stage.
So from our Oregon COVID economic impact study, we found that more than like 68% of Oregon's tourism businesses and organizations, like our hotels, restaurants, guide and outfitters, were temporarily closed due to COVID. And around 50% of those tourism businesses saw their revenue decline by 90% or more in April. This last tier and phase focuses on business development and essential technical assistance to the organizations and businesses that really rely on travel and tourism to be resilient going forward. And those specific niches are like lodging, culinary and agritourism businesses, recreation. So around training, this program will take the most effective components of the Oregon Tourism Studio with those 12 years of history supporting Oregon's communities to provide new targeted training and education that creates impactful business growth, recovery, and resiliency by building a foundation for enhancing and expanding on virtual engagement and assistance. Travel Oregon would focus on engagement through interactive sessions that would link industry sector experts with businesses throughout Oregon. Sessions would include breakout discussions and forums that really dive deep into that content area. Sessions will be offered at like more localized levels, especially connecting destination organizations with key businesses to support that cohesion and to support those excellent visitor experiences that we really want to be showcasing. Destination organizations could also apply a destination assessment tool that's created by Travel Oregon to assess whether key experiences are ready to promote to the public. And then lastly, around assistance. It's essential to provide that direct business support through guided technical assistance and coaching. Businesses that complete like certain programmatic elements would be eligible. Assistance will be provided through technical industry experts to business managers to walk through specific operational tactics to support job retention and business profitability. And Travel Oregon would be working with local, regional, state, and federal providers of technical expertise and content. And some of those examples Lisa's also highlighted, but like Orla, Oregon Wine Board, our land managers, Oregon Destination Association, Business Oregon, Rare, Oregon Main Street, and many more. With 3 webinars out, it's clear that this is just the beginning of what's shaping up to be a pretty expansive program. Around content alignment, we'll be communicating with other partners about integrating trainings as well as funneling partner programs into our communication to maximize access of information to the industry. With Travel Oregon's really strong relationships with community leaders, DMOs and RDMOs, and partners at the local, regional, and state levels, staff will be communicating actively to engage and provide resources and create feedback loops at the same time for quick improvements and being able to be pretty nimble to ensure that this program is meeting the needs and the outcomes that Lisa shared. And then lastly, there are really no words to describe and convey the impact that COVID-19 is having on our state. We've endured public health crises and economic challenges in the past, but none have so severely impacted every person here in Oregon, and it hasn't ever been this sudden or severe. And this program is driving towards long-term business recovery and will support the reopening and resiliency for Oregon's tourism businesses. Thank you all.
Excellent. Lisa and Alexa, thank you so very much. Commissioners, any questions for Lisa and Alexa?
Yep, of course I do. So Lisa, Alexa, great presentation. I'm really excited about this program. I did have one question. Have you reached out to Tim Williams over at Oregon Film? Because I think it would be super helpful if you haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. Oregon Film is actually one of our top 5 strategic partners. We talk with Tim probably every other week, so he will definitely be engaged. We probably didn't call him out, we should have, but we will definitely be working kind of with our top 5 strategic partners as well as all the other ones named. So Oregon Film, Sport Oregon, Business Oregon, Restaurant and Lodging Association, and Oregon Wine Board.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say yay, yay, yay. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, thank you. Kudos.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the same thing. Thank you, Lisa and Alexa, for all your efforts. We are requiring our employees to wear masks, and we have plexiglass, more plexiglass than I've ever seen in this organization. So if someone can figure out how a guest can hear you with a mask on and through plexiglass, that's where you should focus your training. It's been challenging for us here at the mill.
I bet. Thank you, Lucinda.
Not to mention all the signage all over properties now and tape and guidelines and just like that whole sense that everything is so different. So just, I think this really good communication is really helpful. And I just think there's a lot to be said about getting together and talking it out with people who are going through the same thing. There's just a lot to be said there, and sharing ideas and processes and all the challenges that we're all dealing with. So just great stuff. Thank you.
I want to point out the collaborations that you guys are engaged with, and no single person has to come up with theory here or a process or spread the word, but together, specifically with Orla and several webcasts, that information is getting out to people that really need it, and I appreciate the collaborations there. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, Greg. That's really an important part of this program, not only externally with our partners, but just internally across our agency, that we can be more aligned with the education and the training that we're providing. Thank you for mentioning that.
I would just echo Greg's comment. I think that the importance of redundancy of messaging is really essential right now. A lot of people feel like they're not receiving communication when they are, and so it just needs to come at a time when our ears are open and receptive, and so many people are working with their head down right now. So the diversity with which you can distribute your messaging as well as repetition, I think, is really important, and I'm grateful for the work y'all are doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Lisa and Alexa? Great work. Thank you both for the presentation, and thanks to everybody on the team for that cross-collaborative work again. Commissioners, the final update that we have for you today is related to the marketing recovery campaign that is in the works, has been in the works, and it's timely to bring this forward, because I know that there have been questions about this, especially as Sarah Morrissey alluded to, what can be done in different phases, and we're obviously monitoring that as we've gone along. So at this point, I will turn it over to Kevin Wright, who's our VP of Global Marketing, and Katie Clare, who's our Director of Global Marketing. So Kevin, Katie, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thanks, Todd. Can I get a thumb up if people can hear me okay? Great. Good afternoon, commissioners. As Todd mentioned, today, Katie Clare and I will share what the marketing team's been working on and working towards as we navigate tourism marketing during COVID-19. Challenging times for marketing is an understatement. Budget reductions, consumer sentiment towards travel, product availability, community readiness, non-essential travel restrictions make things a little bit more challenging, but I'm going to walk you through what we've been working on and again, working towards. Before I hop in, I do want to compliment Commissioner Youngblood on the cryptocore. Well done, sir. Appreciate you being on brand. So in April, I think we were probably talking about this at the last commission meeting. We had a lot of excitement and momentum for bringing Oregon Slightly Exaggerated to a new market. We were poised to add LA to our markets for the spring campaign. We had a significant buy in place. And right before we launched, COVID took hold in the US with major outbreaks in Washington and California. As the cases grew, we slowly scaled back our spring ad buy. First, we pulled out of home, then we moved everything to digital. Then we eliminated LA as a market before scrapping the campaign entirely. The silver lining in that is no money was spent during that campaign, so we were able to hold it for better timing. In addition, we paused our new creative work that we're developing with the 9 federally recognized tribes. We began working closely with OHSU and the Oregon Health Authority and the governor's office to align messaging about staying home and saving lives, which is a position pretty antithetical to what we do, getting people out of their homes and traveling about. That was definitely a shift for us. But Travel Oregon has the platforms, and we have the audience to help communicate that message and help flatten the curve. We continue to walk a fine line of keeping Oregon in consumers' minds as a preferred travel destination, while sharing information with our audience about what they can and can't do so they can continue to support Oregon's tourism businesses. We continue to follow the lead of the governor's office on how much we can promote travel with restrictions on non-essential travel in place. And we have regular meetings with OHSU and the governor's office to ensure our messaging is consistent in a rapidly evolving environment, especially as we begin to reopen. At the same time, we're working with Wine & Kennedy. We began working with them immediately on a new brief to have a campaign ready to roll out when restrictions on non-essential travel are lifted. So the research team, you have heard a couple of shout outs from a variety of presenters calling out the research team, and it's true. They've been working overtime to better understand our new COVID reality. We released a business impact survey in May showing 50% of tourism businesses saw revenue declines of 90% or more. To help share information about the impacts of COVID-19 on our industry, Travel Oregon research team is compiling state and national data on a weekly basis to share with our external partners. There is a wealth of really good data that they're putting together on a regular basis, from Smith Travel to social media consumer sentiment to the Oregon social mobility scorecard. This could be an entirely separate presentation that we don't have time to get into today. But I would suggest that everyone visit the survey opportunities and data section on the COVID toolkit within our industry site. So you can see these, and I'm sure you already are, but if not, please sign up. There's a lot of really good information there. So with that, I'll pass it over to Katie to share more detail on our marketing work to date.
Hey everyone. We'll try to be pretty quick. I know that we're running over, but I think what we just want to share a little bit is where we've been, and then we'll go into more detail about where we're going to go. So like Kevin said, we really did shift our voice and our platform to be used to what the tourism need was. And for a few months, and we continue to see for some counties in particular, that is a stay home or a stay local message. And so in March, especially right at the end of March, when, like Kevin said, we should have been gearing up to launch our campaign, we were able to use our channels to really and directly communicate a stay home message and to save lives. And this also goes to support not just that travelers needed to have clear information that they really should stop traveling, and that also included any of the typical travel that we see around our state of people thinking that it's not really travel if I'm going to someplace that is a quick drive to me, which could be what we saw for a lot of communities like the North Coast, was a quick drive from Portland. So you can see here on March 22nd, we took a tone in our channels that's unlike we've had before, which was very clear and direct that our communities really needed us to stay home. And so as we've been going through that, I'll illustrate through this where we were at today, but we had to take that line for a period of time of just really educating and informing why it's important to stay home, and how by staying home and taking some action and taking actions from your home to support those communities, you're really doing the best thing for them. So we continue to have that line. So while the Travel Oregon message is in that space, we also did have the governor's office, especially after that weekend. They reached out to the Travel Oregon team to see if we would coordinate a campaign with Oregon Health Authority, OHA, and OHSU to have a very clear, to work with Wine & Kennedy, to have a very clear message that people needed to stay home. And so it was a Sunday through a Saturday to create this entire campaign. An advertising campaign like this typically takes at least 3 to 4 months. I'd say up to a year in some cases from what I've seen, but we worked with those teams to create what we're calling the yellow campaign, or the Don't Accidentally Kill Someone. So like I said, the governor's office reached out to Travel Oregon to ask us to coordinate with Wine & Kennedy, OHA, and OHSU. This was not a Travel Oregon voice or message, but something as an agency that was really important for us to support, because by people staying home and saving lives, we knew that our economy and travel and tourism with non-essential travel could start again sooner. And so we were really interested in that. And of course, when your boss calls you to do something, you do it. So we were able to do this. We have a timeline that keeps getting bumped from me sharing it, but if you ever want background information, I'd love to share. It was a really interesting process, but we briefed in the creative teams on a Monday, and we had our first creative review Tuesday at 8 p.m. because it was moving so fast. So I think most of you have seen this. This campaign has wrapped. The creative materials are still out there if anyone would like to use them. I am going to share the essential heroes because we launched with a very strong, and it was, if anyone's familiar with marketing and advertising, this had a very clear target. This was for people that were not listening to the Stay Home, Save Lives green campaign. This was specifically targeted towards audiences that weren't paying attention to other messages, which is why there's strong colors, there's strong messages. So we have this campaign wrapped. There was over 4 million views of the videos. We were able to license these assets so that as Travel Oregon, we were able to offer them to all other states to use cost-free. And then what we did find with that is we had 5 partners which were able to use them. It was interesting is that the people that showed the most interest had they didn't have the assets within their state, which included Alabama, which we were talking about earlier. But that was Delaware, North Dakota, Maine, and Nebraska. And then we also were able to submit the work. The United Nations put out a call for creative to support COVID safety messages. And so that was used. And from that, Boris Johnson from the UK Prime Minister actually used a version of this and pushed it out, which is interesting. So I'm going to check my video settings to make sure that you can hear sound real fast. And then we'll go through this.
The word hero is used far too often. Comic book heroes, celebrity heroes, sports heroes. And right now, none of them can do anything for us. It's in times like these we realize who the real heroes are. They are the ones that keep the world turning, who every day come face to face with the same enemy everyone is being told to avoid. They're out there for you. Stay home for them. The word hero.
So with that, so what is a Travel Oregon role and voice in that? And what we've really found our place and how we can really communicate with our audiences through education and translation of some of these more nuanced messages about what does reopening mean for you? How does this impact places you like to go? And how can you help make the best decision for you? So if you look on traveloregon.com, we have a page that specifically speaks to this. Mo and Sachi from the content team have been doing an absolutely incredible job with this content. We have I know that this is an entire marketing team effort, but how we've really been looking at this is how do we create information? Most people don't know when they're transitioning county lines or where some of their favorite cities that they like to go to, where they are. And so what we've been focusing on is how do we take county information and quickly translate that to consumers. So that's including top cities and key destinations within those counties. So if people are looking for that information, as those reopenings have been happening, we've been promoting this through paid search on social media, and then of course on traveloregon.com. And then another area that we've been really focusing on through this education component is outdoor recreation. So we know with just about half of Oregon being public lands, that this is a key thing that people like to do. We talk about it a lot in our marketing, and I think all of us is just as an experience like to have it. We also know that for people that have been cooped up in their homes, that it sounds very attractive to go hiking. So things like that. So we want to take this, we have a very strong interest in taking this information about how to access the outdoors. What do these reopenings mean for you, and where can you find this information? So again, we created resources on traveloregon.com that we've been able to promote a lot through social media, and that we've also been able to work really closely with partners like Oregon Parks and Recreation and the Office of Outdoor Recreation to create messaging within the Take Care Out There brand and style that can be used by all partners. So when we started to see public lands reopen at the beginning of May, there were some key messages that needed to be shared, and those have continued to evolve. So this is just an example of some of the things that we've been able to do. You can see the prepare, the stay local messages, make sure to check the park status. Those are just things that have been important, but are more, continue to be very important. You can also see things like in the middle, we were able to get a photography shoot out to capture images of people in masks, because we know that that's something that we, by leading with an example, it shows people how that's easy to do. So it's like, we have a lot of questions about, I need to, how and where should I wear those masks? So we have things on boat ramps, on hiking trails, when you're at a park having a picnic, etc. So just really being able to use those, and we're able to license those images so that all of our partners are able to use them. So last, within this, as we've evolved from the pretty clear and stark stay home message, we have seen this message evolve to really that stay local, and then really driving the support local. So that's where we are at currently, is really driving the stay local, support local. As we'll get into, we're really getting ready to transition into some of the non-essential travel messaging with the recovery campaign. So this is kind of the last thing. You can see Memorial Day at home, exploring outdoors virtually. I will say, like you've heard throughout all of this, this has been a really big team effort. So all of our partnerships, from outdoor recreation with destination development, helping us in that space, to Sarah Morrissey in public affairs, working with the governor's office to really inform a lot of this content. And then with the marketing team, it's just been all hands on deck. And I know that Mo and Sachi, the research team with Michael, LaDan, Brian, and Kelda with the outdoor recreation, it's just been a really great effort. And I think we're coming to a really great spot, but you'll continue to see us throughout all of our work, pushing the education and translation of what some of these messages as we reopen look like. So with that, I'm going to transition back to Kevin.
Thanks, Katie. So the day we pulled the plug on our spring slightly exaggerated campaign, we rebriefed Wyden to begin working on a new advertising campaign we could have ready to launch when we felt it was safe. While counties are now entering phase 2 status and things are beginning to reopen, we continue to meet with the governor's office to determine an appropriate time for the launch of this work. We did receive the green light from the governor's office to send a small local film crew around Oregon to capture imagery and film for this campaign. We all know the power of our creative has in the opportunity that we have in front of us to leverage pent-up demand to inspire overnight stays all over Oregon. There's a lot of added pressure knowing how many businesses and communities and jobs are on the line. Creative is still in development, but we wanted to show you the direction. The entire world is on pause. While this global epidemic has stopped us from moving, it hasn't stopped us from dreaming of the day when we can travel. We want to tap into that feeling with a message that will inspire Oregonians to explore Oregon when we are comfortable to roam again. While this global epidemic has stopped us from moving, it hasn't stopped us from dreaming of the day when we can travel. We want to tap into that feeling with a message that will inspire Oregonians to explore Oregon once it's safe to roam again. So the approach is guided by 3 insights. 1, cabin fever. People have been cooped up in their homes and they're ready to get out. Close to home. When travel begins again, people will be a bit more cautious where they travel. Budgets will also be lean. Therefore, we're going to focus on local travel. And then lastly, community pride. The pandemic has given us a stronger sense of community in our physical separation. In the midst of crisis, we're seeing people come together. Currently, that is helping each other get essential things to survive. In the future, it might look like helping communities rebuild what we've lost by being more intentional about where we spend our money and where we travel. People want to support their community now more than ever. This campaign is designed to make Oregon feel local and inspire Oregonians to explore their community. So I'm just going to walk you through the creative idea. Forgive me as I kind of just read the slide here. So we'll roll through a montage of Oregon views in a way that's very familiar, but has never been shown before. Like in previous Travel Oregon campaigns, we'll see a bunch of gorgeous views that make us want to get out into Oregon right now. The difference is that these views will be through some sort of barrier, like a window, computer, binoculars, windshield. We'll see Mount Hood through a kitchen window, the coast through binoculars, Eastern Oregon through rearview mirrors, and even a couple of friends separated by a pane of glass. To end the spot, we'll land on a shot from inside a parked car of someone walking outside, free to be out in the open again. While we haven't landed on a tagline, we know we're going to need to be flexible with our tagline. This is just a working tagline, so don't get too married to it. But the current working tagline was, there's nothing between you and Oregon anymore, or depending on kind of the situation, soon there will be nothing between you and Oregon. We don't know if either of those will work, and we're actually working on some other lines. And we're also vetting the creative, as we do with our creative, to get some other minority viewpoints on it. Our briefs with Wyden inherently have DEI and making sure we're including minority groups within our creative. And so that's something we have done, and we'll often vet the creative like we did with Oregon Slightly Exaggerated with different groups. And something that's come up to us in the process is the idea, removing COVID from the conversation, there's nothing between you and Oregon anymore. Knowing that for some folks, for some minorities, even if there isn't a global pandemic, there still may be things between them and Oregon. So we want to recognize that and get some more inputs on that. But the reason I share all that with you is mostly just to say that it kind of illustrates how flexible we need to be with our messaging, especially when we're creating something that's going to go in a digital format. It's going to be a video. This was all created before our current social crisis. And so with COVID, with everything that's happening, we still need to remain extremely flexible in the messaging that we're going to be putting out. And something else I want to add, just as a reminder, to keep in mind, the role of our advertising is to elicit a consumer action. So in our case, that's calling our 1-800 number or visiting traveloregon.com. Our creative needs to be simple and compelling enough to do this. And then once we get the consumer on traveloregon.com, we can share all of the additional content that we know we're going to need to do to support this campaign, whether it's the county by county phases, safe travel information, road trips and ideas, dispersion concepts like Take Care Out There. So this is just to get people to our site so we can share more detail. And obviously we can't share all of that in a 30-second spot. So that's the creative direction. With that, I'll pass it over to Katie to share a little bit more detail on how we plan to roll it out.
Yeah, I'll keep this pretty top line, and we're going to continue to share, and as our plans continue to get more detailed and evolve with especially our regional destination management partners, and then also through the industry site. So for paid media for this campaign, we will keep this all digital as well. As we saw through March, we know that as things continue to evolve with COVID, and if our plans need to change as it becomes more appropriate or less so to promote non-essential travel, we want to be nimble enough to go after that. So our plans now is to have this be an Oregon-only target for this campaign. We intend to evaluate that as we move through the campaign to see if it becomes more appropriate in August. We'll reassess, and if it's not appropriate to go out of state, then we'll reallocate those funds to amplify the message in state. We also know with all of our paid media partners that we can target either down to the county level or the zip code level. Because we're not doing broadcast, we don't have to worry about that DMA reach. And so we're able to, as Kevin was saying, with flexibility with the message, we're continuing to reassess, for instance, if there needs to be one message for Multnomah County versus a message for phase 2 counties. We'll be continuing to look at things like that. Just kind of reinforcing what we're really looking to do. It's a phased campaign, and really how we're looking at the phases is what is that initial outreach that's more of that focus on online video, of the creative, heavy up of online travel agency OTA buy. So think like Expedia's Pricelines, Sojourn with video distribution, and then a lot of social video. What we're able to do there is really focus on kind of that initial message that you should either start planning your trip or start thinking about taking your trip. And like Kevin said, reinforce throughout social in particular that Travel Oregon is the resource to do that, so you can get information about responsible trips. So one of the biggest things that we know here is that you're going to need to, while you are able to travel, you won't be able to take the same trip that you did last summer. And so how do we continue to educate and bring people along in that space? Like when they go somewhere, they're going to encounter people at the front desk with a mask on. Just be ready for that experience, things like that. So we're a lot of really getting people into the trip planning mindset, kind of reinforcing that it's okay to start thinking about these things, and then driving in to phase 2, which will be in August, is really the inspire. So this is really starting to give people more solid trip ideas, diving into more detailed custom content with partners like Thrillist, and then on social media, I'll get into that in just a moment, but then we'll really start diving into some custom video content that we'll be creating that really shows these new experiences that people will be having this year. This is just real quick, this media buy, you'll see it again, continuing to drive towards traveloregon.com, where we'll share more. And then lastly, I just wanted to share this on social. Like I was saying, we're going to be creating custom content on social that's going to be a lot of click ads driving to educational content. So this is just a good example of where we've been, and I think what you'll continue to see. So inspirational photo, face masks on a boat dock, still showing people how they can go out there with a little bit of information about taking care out there when they're doing that activity, and then driving back to information like social distancing in the outdoors. We're going to continue to push this throughout the campaign. We're also going to be featuring businesses, at least one video per each region, looking to shoot for 2 that show experiences like going to a winery, going to a brewery, going to a hotel or a resort, and has the business owner walking people through that it's okay to do that, but here's what that experience is going to look like this summer. So if you're going to a restaurant or brewery, be prepared to bring a face mask when you come in, but when you sit down, you don't have to wear it when you're in your party. So just walking through some of those things, because we know that that's going to be really important. We've seen from the data and research that Kevin was talking through earlier, we know that people are traveling. And so we think by having a voice in this space and by providing the information about what people can and can't do, that we can be a real resource and an asset to Oregonians and to our travel and tourism partners. So we plan to continue to work in that space and have this campaign be hopefully very meaningful and drive a lot of economic impact. So that's the very quick version of that. Our next step here is we are working towards a July 14 launch of this campaign now. We were looking at July 6th due to just where the creative is at, and then also impacts from things like Multnomah County not opening. That plan just needs to shift a little bit. And so like Kevin was saying, we have to be very nimble in that space, and we will continue to do so. So that is my portion. I'm not sure, Kevin, if you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think what you mentioned about trying to provide consistency and alignment for the industry is definitely something on our mind, and trying to convey that, through the governor's office. We have another meeting with the governor's communications team, and next week, I believe, or it's in the works. And I have been seeing a little bit of an uptick. I haven't done enough research in the last week to see if it's just more testing or if it's truly an uptick in cases. But, best laid plan. So if the 16th may change, if we start seeing an uptick in cases, that's a potential. So I think we're, working with OHSU and the governor's office and the doctors. That's where we're taking our lead as far as what's responsible as far as messaging out there.
That's a great point, Kevin. Katie, Kevin, thank you so much for the presentation. Commissioners, questions for Kevin and Katie at this time?
I have a unique personal one, Kevin, because I've seen that you've been advertising on TripAdvisor more often, or were before this. TripAdvisor notifies top hotels in the industry of annual awards that normally is disclosed to the hotel in January, and the award is publicized in the same month. They let us know that we were awarded this isn't necessarily personal, but they let hotels know they were awarded a cherished award in January, but they were going to release exactly what that was in April. COVID-19 pushed that out to an undisclosed date. And Oregon is a very unique state with these awards, and these are national awards and international awards that Oregon wins. Though we are far fewer than 1% of the hotels in the nation, and 12% of the award winners for finest hotel in the nation were from Oregon last year. 12% best service in Oregon, and 8% romance, which I happen to be one of, in Oregon. And pushing out those awards to an undisclosed date is a rough one. And if you have any connection with TripAdvisor, if they could be motivated to disclose those sooner than better, or sooner as we open up, it would be a great fuel for Oregon's fire to be able to disclose exactly how well Oregon did as a whole in these areas. And it's a unique opportunity. It is for our small hotel, as an example, in a small county, in a smaller town. It's a huge boost when you're featured on CNN as a top destination, and a huge boost for Oregon. So if you could do anything there, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Sure, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. TripAdvisor had significant layoffs there, and I know that because both Katie and I are pretty close with our former rep, who was promoted to a bigger position a long time ago, and recently, probably in the last couple of weeks, notified us due to the layoffs that he would be our rep again. So his name is Todd, and he's a great guy. And if there's anything that can be done, I know that Todd would help us out. So we'll reach out to him to see what we can find out about it. And I'm also curious to find out just more about the awards, to see what, if any, like what exposure we can get for the state, for yourselves and the state out of it. And is it, maybe the PR team could use that information for some of their pitching as well.
Yeah, every year for the last 5 years, it's been a hugely disproportionate amount of Oregon hotels receiving these awards. And specifically for service, we are consistently garnering at least 2 hotels that of 25 that are awarded best service in the nation. And last year was 3, so we're doing quite well as a state for sure.
Doesn't surprise me, but thanks for sharing.
Kevin and Katie, thank you for the presentation, and specifically on the work around creating messaging to illustrate what it looks like to be physically distant in social environments, to get back out in there. I think that you cannot overstate the importance of giving people a sense of helping to define what that elusive new normal is that we're all waiting for. We went into a McMinimans on Sunday to get a burger and a beer as a family, and both our own reaction and others entering the restaurant around us, you would think they were walking into to visit a new denomination of church for the first time. It was just foreign, and is this the right ritual, and what do I do, and stilted. And so the more that you can do to show people what it's like to walk into a tasting room, to walk into a restaurant, to visit a hotel for the first time, to guide a set of expectations is so timely and brilliant as we move into phase 2. And I just wanted to thank you for that, and also for the extent to which you were able to help expedite the Yellow campaign. A lot was made at the beginning of the year of Travel Oregon having a long-standing relationship with Wyden and Kennedy. But were it not for that long-standing relationship, were it not for that pre-existing contract, were it not for that special relationship, the speed that Katie so eloquently spoke of in terms of concepts to execution would have never been possible. And I just want to thank you for your humble job of enabling that process and bringing together the parties to facilitate magic, which happened in an unreasonably quick amount of time.
Yeah, kudos go to Katie and Sarah Morrissey, who were project leads on that. I had the privilege of being on a couple of Zoom calls at 10 or 11 o'clock at night with the governor herself. And it was pretty amazing to see what Wyden and Kennedy brought to the table. It was, you know, they brought some of the most famous minds in that shop to the work, all pro bono. So it was pretty fun to watch that unfold, and pretty awesome. And Katie and Sarah did an excellent job keeping everybody informed in a very quick timeline.
I forgot to say something which I do just want to call out because I think it's really important, is we also were able to partner, and still are through December, partnering with Oregon Health Authority and our agency Logical Positions, which runs our paid search. There was a Google ad grant, and it was in the report, but I just can't emphasize enough how important this is. They're running the entire paid search of all terms related to COVID, and also things like when people search COVID unemployment resources for the state through all pro bono through Logical Positions, and Brian Mullaney and our team is running that. And that includes information for the Safe and Strong campaign, which has information related to COVID unemployment and impacts from it in at least 6 languages, I think potentially 9, I need to fact check, but something like that is really important. And I was really proud of the team to be able to jump in and provide that resource. And because we have an agency and someone that has search expertise running it, Google has come back as feedback that our campaigns and those efforts are more impactful than many other states because they are all relying on Google to run that. So that was just something, it was like, is a little bit different for business, but it was really important that we were able to provide. So I just wanted to make sure to call that out.
Let's see, Kevin, Katie, thanks for the presentation. It's always good to see what's coming up. I think each of you alluded to the fact that people are beginning to travel again in Oregon, particularly outside of the Portland area where things are still shut down. And, you know, local DMOs are already promoting travel in many cases, not uniformly, but in many cases. In Lane County, it's probably a month ago that we launched some of the messaging around preparing people to travel again and showing them what it might look like. I understand that Travel Oregon's brief is statewide, so you've got to balance a message that fits Portland versus the rest of the state, but there are some risks, I think, in leaving some of that to a later date. So I'm curious, you said mid-July. I would have some concerns about pushing that out later, at least for the rest of the state, because the quicker that we can educate folks who are choosing to travel, at least outside of the Portland area, about what it looks like and get them comfortable with what it looks like, but also acting in the way that we want them to act. I think there's some benefit to that. Can you comment?
Yeah, I think you can decouple them. There's the ad campaign that's going to drive a lot more eyeballs to our say website where we can share that information. But we're flexible enough that as the content team develops the content that Katie was speaking to, how to travel in this community. If we've been ready to go, we've been wanting to go, as soon as possible, but obviously want to do it appropriately. So I think what you'll find is what would happen is if that were to get pushed out, the creative that I was sharing with you, we would continue down the path of sharing the content, kind of like what we're doing now, but there's degrees. We can start to amplify that If it was about what you can, if it's about what you can do and where, and we have the content that we can start showing, we can start putting paid media behind that. So we start getting more eyeballs and we can hold the creative for a later launch. So it's not one or the other. We can continue. We're in this kind of zone right now as far as, you know, we're putting a little bit of paid for search. We're boosting some of this content through our social channels. So we can amplify that and still hold the creative if we need to.
It is an interesting challenge, trying to balance a state that is not all at the same state of readiness. So thanks for that comment.
And Katie's been doing some work with the media team to see, you know, with the advertising, another option would be, you know, maybe we can use that creative in certain zips or certain counties. So, you know, it's way more complicated, but the Widen team has been great. Once you're on TV and you're purely digital, it opens up a lot of opportunities for us as far as just getting very targeted geographic messages out there.
And we are also confirming what the county by county plans look to, especially as we increase paid search, which is entirely responsive, but we know a great traffic driver. And so we're continuing to confirm the plan of how do we active and paid search and digital in response to county by county openings and how we're targeting that. And we're also looking at STR data to help us inform how our county's doing as they're in phase 2 for need of lodging assistance and support. So that's also helping to confirm some of the needs that we anticipate to see as we go through this summer. So yeah, like Kevin said, we have the campaign, which is a main focal point, but we have many layers that we're building to support throughout all marketing channels.
Any other questions or comments for Kevin or Katie? All right. Well, thank you both. Great job. Great presentation. Chair Youngblood, as I turn this back over to you, I just want to acknowledge that we've heard the words nimble, flexible, and responsive a lot on this meeting, and lest we get confused as being a yoga or a Pilates class online, I just want to be really clear that that structure, again, did not happen by accident. There was a lot of intentionality around it, and the work of the staff team is demonstrated here this afternoon and this morning. I cannot praise enough. They have embraced that status and that opportunity and used it to the industry's and the state's benefit. And you're sensing that here in these reports. I want to especially thank Sarah Watson for her flexibility and responsiveness in truly herding the proverbial cats around this meeting. She's had a lot of help in the back of the house, and she would be the first to acknowledge that. So my thanks to Gracia and Kate Jorgensen for their help in monitoring the YouTube stream and the back of the house on the Zoom broadcast itself. A very special thanks to the entire staff team for the presentations, for the work that they're doing that's demonstrated here today. And then a final thank you to you as commissioners, because the confidence and trust that you hold this team in is greatly valued. It's not taken for granted. And it's what fuels the kind of creativity and innovation that you've seen demonstrated today. So I thank you for that. I thank you for the trust and confidence that you have in me, but not just me, the entire team here at Travel Oregon. And with that, Scott, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Todd. Commissioners, you've compressed you've compressed 2 days worth of content effectively into just under 4 hours. We obviously ran longer than we intended to at noon, although I wouldn't have compromised a minute of anything but my own voice to have received what we did today. So I'm grateful to that and to you for your time and investment. it's also important to thank the folks at Travel Southern Oregon and the town of Lakeview again. We could have been there to enjoy the environment and one another's company. Are there any additional announcements or business that any of you as commission members would like to raise today?
Scott, can I just take a moment? This has been such a heartbreaking and devastating time for the tourism and hospitality industry. And we see businesses shutting down all over the state of Oregon. We see employees laid off at no fault of their own. And I know that we've all experienced that in our businesses. I know I've experienced it here. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the staff that sadly we had to let go as a result of COVID. I think Michelle alluded to it, that Carol Astley was really helping on those grants, you know, and the staff was doing their job till the very last day and showing up. And it just shows what remarkable people they are, and how they were really committed to the work of Travel Oregon. And I would like to thank the staff for the work that they're doing. We've used pivoting and being nimble at a moment's notice, assuming additional responsibilities. I always continue to be inspired by the team's thoughtfulness, the ability to be innovative in a crisis, shows just how incredibly talented this team is. And I just want to thank you as a commissioner for the work that you're doing on behalf of the tourism industry and on the state. It's going to make a big difference for the businesses that can remain open. So thank you to the entire staff. I'm so incredibly grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Lucinda. Kenji.
All right, so I actually do have some sort of industry announcement. Oregon Film just opened up their Oregon Production Investment Fund auction. That'll be opening up on September 28th to individual and corporate Oregon taxpayers. $14 million of Oregon state tax credits can be purchased, and you can save up to 10% on your taxes. So that'll be opening up on September 28th. And it's a way to support the film industry, which has been impacted greatly too. The other thing that I want to mention was Brad and Bob's presentation was absolutely fantastic. If you take a look at my background, hold on one second, I'll move out of the way for you. That's Fort Rock. So that's one of the places that you can visit. And I'd recommend to all the commissioners, when it's safe to do so, to actually visit Lake County, because it's not only Fort Rock, but you have Christmas Valley, which also has an OHV area. There's Summer Lake, which has a little hot spring next to it. And you can visit Paisley, which is a little cowboy bar down there, which is actually fairly hip. And then right east of that is the Steens Mountain and Alver Desert. So you can mark a whole bunch of things off your list. So I'd recommend highly for you to visit down there when you get a chance. And then the last thing is, this commission meeting's been fantastic, talking about the collaboration, everybody working together to overcome sort of the COVID-19 and the issues surrounding racism in our country. And I just want to say that it's great to see everybody come together, because when it comes right down to it, we're all in this together, whether it's just our community in the travel and tourism industry, whether it be the state agencies, to all the members of our state, to all of us in the nation. We're all in this together, and that's the way we're going to get through these trying times. It's just working all together with one goal in mind, to get past these trials that we're faced. And what's going to happen is we're going to come out on the other side stronger than ever. So I want to thank you, everybody, for their time and just everything that you've done so far. Thanks.
Thank you, Kenji. Friends, any other comments? All right. Well, our next scheduled commission public meeting will be October 6th. I look forward to seeing you there, and if we can figure it out, maybe a collective road trip to Lake County. We'll convoy behind Kenji, and see you there. The meeting's adjourned. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.